Your veins. It is a 9:20 tip tonight for the national championship game. I feel like it's kind of an annual first Monday in April. I'm always like, why the hell does this game tip so late? And how old am I getting that I am moaning about that? Obviously, we'll chat a lot about that on today's show. The Pacers officially eliminated from the playoffs as they have been doing their best part to quietly tank over the past week or so. And a whole lot to unpack from what was a busy sports weekend and a busy travel weekend. Good morning, Jake Query. Planes, trains, and automobiles.
Those
and
aren't
here?
pillows. Let's see. The 30-second short of it would be this. Yes, there were really bad storms. I think actually there might have been a tornado in Dallas. They moved up the start time of the IndyCar race, not by much, but they did move it up. And the weather was great. The race was great. It was a fast race.
Awesome race.
So we got done, and I'm like, oh, man, we had an 8 o'clock flight out of Dallas Love Field on Southwest. I mean, no blame on Southwest here. I totally get it. The weather was terrible. So we got notice that my 8 o'clock flight was canceled, but there was a 4 o'clock flight. And I'm like, well, I'll just go and see if I can jump on that flight. En route there, they then said Dallas Love Field Airfield or whatever they call it was basically shut down because of the storms, which were only expected to last until like 6. So at that point, full credit and kudos to Shannon Walsh, who I called and
for many reasons, not just her traveling ability.
She's a travel agent.
Yeah.
So she found one seat left on a flight to Cincinnati. And then, full credit to my buddy Mike Byron, who I called and said, hey, what are you doing tonight? Nothing. And I said, well, good. Then you're picking me up in Cincinnati at 9:45. So
exactly what he wanted to be doing.
He drove down to Cincinnati and picked me up and drove me back to the Indy airport where my car was. And then I got home and crashed out, and here we are. So that's kind of the fun of it, to be honest with you. Now, my coworkers, Mark Janes, Nick Yeoman, and Michael Young, drove back. They had a different car, and so they, as soon as it was canceled, because the flights they had us coming back on, they rebooked me on one through Phoenix. It would have gotten back very late tonight. So those guys drove back, and kudos to them for doing it. And hopefully they spent the night last night near somewhere in Missouri. So hope they get safe travels to them. But
I thought maybe you just hop in with Potto Ward or Joseph Newgarden and see if they were going to keep that entertainment going for another hundred miles.
That was a heck of a race, man. I mean, those two guys were both on rails, and that was Texas the way it's intended to be raced. I mean, side by side, great racing. It was a great weekend in sports too. I mean, the San Diego State game was fantastic. Hard to think, Kevin, that San Diego State, the way they defend, they've got a shot against Connecticut, but boy, Connecticut's awfully strong. Man.
Yeah, it's been pretty clinical by UConn throughout. Again, 5 straight games here of double-digit victories. They don't put a single liability out on the floor. No one. You can't, sag off on anybody. I mean, all of them are threats, and all of them are threats to do multiple things. It's been absolutely surgical watching Danny Hurley. And you know what? And we can get into this more. For Danny Hurley, Jake, this has probably got to be like, hey, yeah, I am the other Hurley. I am the other brother.
Correct.
I'm sure he's lived with that a whole lot of his life, considering how great of a college player his brother was. And honestly, you can make the argument, his brother, a little bit more of an accomplished college basketball coach until here recently. So a ton to get to on this Monday morning. Speaking of weather, certainly thinking about everybody in the Whiteland area, Sullivan, Indiana, just some horrific tornadoes around the state, especially Friday night. And it sounds like we might get a little bit more of severe weather coming up Tuesday night. And that's this time of year as the weather certainly starts to improve, and we love that. Living in this part of the country, we know full well what that is all about. So thinking about everybody in those parts of the state that have been impacted and where Jake was over the weekend, because I think it's hitting all parts of the country. Nate Atkins is going to join us at 8:30. He was at the Anthony Richardson Pro Day, which rounded out last week. The Colts had, I would say, a little bit more important representation at the Anthony Richardson Pro Day than they have had at some others. Curious Nate's thoughts on what he saw from Richardson and just what he makes of that. I did think it was an interesting note from Peter King this morning saying that the Colts will work out all 4 quarterbacks this week. So You want to talk about what is typically a quiet week in the NFL calendar. The Colts start their offseason program next week. It is a massive week in terms of them coming to a conclusion on this quarterback decision. I'm guessing, Jake, you didn't get a chance. You were probably on hold with Southwest to watch a whole lot of LSU Iowa yesterday.
I just got your text that you asked if I landed okay. I did, by the way.
I figured I would walk in, and that's when I would know if you landed okay or not.
I did, by the way, to answer your question. I watched a lot of Iowa and South Carolina, and then I watched bits and pieces. I was in the airport when I got to the Dallas airport. Again, another tip of the cap to Matt Hoke, who works for IndyCar Video Boards, who's a member of the American Airlines Admiral Club. I've never actually paid for that little thing, and he was, and he's like, "Hey, you just want to go up there with me?" So we went up and were able to sit and kind of relax a little bit in some nice chairs, waiting for the flights to get out. And they had the game on, so I saw it in the background and was watching a little of it. And I know you're not a fan of. Now, what do you describe the head coach of LSU? How do you describe her?
Kim Mulkey. She's nuts. Yeah, absolutely nuts. She's the Robert Montgomery of the women's game.
And I know a lot was made, and I didn't, I wasn't sitting and watching in totality, so I had to go with clips that I saw. But I know that a lot was made of kind of the taunting of Caitlin Clark towards the end of that game. But let's be real. She's pretty demonstrative herself in games over the course of the tournament, right? And, part of that is I think is it unsportsmanlike? I don't know. It depends on who you ask. But I don't think necessarily that anything was displayed towards her that she did not herself show or display that was seen as an incredible, fiery competitor about her over the course of the tournament.
I hate that that's the first place we have to go or we go. I mean, LSU just set a championship record for most points scored in a national title game.
Yeah,
they
unbelievable,
had three
right?
girls over 20, and none of them were their best player. And Angel Reese, who obviously was a big, instigator of the taunting there late. And obviously the officiating was a huge storyline early on. I thought the Caitlin Clark technical was totally uncalled for from an officiating standpoint and not necessary at all. But how about what LSU did? And certainly what Iowa did on Friday night, Jake, to your point, in dethroning South Carolina, the heavy favorite, was an incredible performance. But LSU, that was darn impressive what they did. And, sure, was Angel Reese a little bit over the top post-buzzer? Probably. But, Caitlin Clark had her moments all throughout the season, all throughout the tournament. And to me, it's just kind of like if that was the men's game, Jake, I don't think we're talking about it too much.
No question about that.
It's like, oh, wait, girls can act like that? I'm like, well, yeah. Have you ever seen a player in the NCAA men's tournament dunk and stand over somebody? Have you ever seen a DB make a big pass breakup and stand over a wideout? I mean, it happens on a day-in, day-out basis in the men's game. Obviously, from an entertainment, from an eyes standpoint, and the numbers, I think, will back this up when we get them tomorrow. The women's tournament, just a huge amount of appeal. And, the really interesting part about this, Jake, I mean, the fact that Caitlin Clark, are you eligible to come out after 3 years?
No, I don't believe so, right? So she's not eligible for the draft.
She'll be back in school.
Yeah, we went over it last week. Yeah, 2024. She's not coming out till then.
Is that an age thing or the number of years since graduation thing? Like, do you have to be of a certain age, or do you have to be 4 years removed? I sat on the flight. I could have
sworn there's been women's basketball players that have left college early. Now, from an NIL standpoint, it might make more sense for her.
Right. I thought, so last night on the flight to Cincinnati, there were three of us in the row, and the girl in the middle, we started talking about basketball, and the girl in the middle said she had played at Western Michigan. And so we were talking about the women's Final Four. And she said that it was an age requirement. She's like, based on her age, she's not required. She's not eligible.
YouTube chat is saying you got to be 22.
Yeah.
So the great thing for women's basketball is it's bad for the Fever, of course, considering they have the number one pick. Albeit the Aaliyah Boston from South Carolina seems like a great selection. But Caitlin Clark, it goes without saying what she would mean you have Caitlin Clark, you have Angel Reese, LSU's best player, all coming back. And remember UConn, Paige Beckers, remember her tearing her ACL at the start of the year?
Yeah, that's right. She was supposed to be the best player in the country,
She'll be
right?
back.
Yeah.
So, again, from a viewership standpoint, that has to be great for the women's game. Were you on the ground? And I'm trying to think of your flight schedule. Were you there on the ground when Lamont Butler hit the shot for San Diego State?
I was. So we got in Friday night, and then
like
Saturday.
Eastern Friday, something like that.
That was Saturday.
Or Saturday night. Yeah.
Yeah. So I went after we got done at the racetrack. I actually ran a few errands in Dallas, and then went to a restaurant near the hotel and just sat and was watching it. And that shot reminded me of, and this is really esoteric, Scott Skiles in 1982 hit a shot for Plymouth to force overtime, either overtime or double overtime against Gary Roosevelt, that was from near the same spot. But the Skiles shot has always been famous in Indiana lore for what they call like the hook. Like he shot it and it looked like it was going to be off, in Skiles' case, to the right, and it kind of hooked left and went in. I thought Butler's shot was wide left. Like when he let go of it, I was like, he missed that to the front of the rim. And then, I mean, that was a hell of a shot. Did you hear the radio call for San Diego State and for...
I did, yeah. I saw a mashup of like Nance, the two radio calls, and then I think it was Spanish radio as well.
What's the name of our friend for Florida Atlantic, Mark, that we had on?
Lavica.
Ken Lavica. Ken
did
not respond to my text, by the way. I texted him Friday. Do you think he thought I jinxed him? I go, hey, just trying to plan ahead. If you guys win, love to have you on Monday night.
Now, he did text me back. But it took a while. I texted him to say, when you do play-by-play, you never know when your moment's going to be there, right? Like when that moment's going to be there, that's the one that's your call. I've never had that, but I'm saying.
Yeah.
And here's a guy that's the radio play-by-play voice of Florida Atlantic, probably never ever thought he would be doing a Final Four, let alone seeing his team on the cusp of playing for a national championship, and they get beat in that moment. And I thought his call was outstanding. He nailed it. I thought it was... I know he had to have been disappointed, so I just sent him a thing saying I thought that was a fabulous call.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
and
agree.
it took like 12 hours, and then he's like, thank you or whatever. But the San Diego State call was really bizarre. Did you hear it?
Yeah, it was a bit odd.
I mean, literally, he was just
Kind of
like,
a weird way to describe it. Kind of had like a Vegas feel to it.
and he is the San Diego State play-by-play guy. Is like, he's like the Bob Lamey of San Diego. He's been around forever, and he does the Padres. He's done the Padres for 40 years, and literally his call was just good. Who's going to the finals? Not the FAU, the Aztecs. I mean, it was just weird.
very, very like showman-like.
Very.
I thought Nance had a really good call, and I thought it was like certainly an accurate statement he made. When John L. Davis, and boy, you got to feel for the Gary kid. He was terrible on Saturday night for FAU. When he misses that shot and San Diego State gets the rebound and starts to go up floor, Nance immediately says something to the effect of like, their shooters are not out there. And that was spot on. San Diego State had their best defensive lineup out there because they were trying to get a stop. And I thought Brian Dutcher was pretty funny after the game, being like, I had ran out of plays to call. That's why I didn't take a timeout. Jake, they had Matt Bradley, their leading scorer, on the bench. They had their second leading scorer on the bench in that moment. I mean, you talk about he would have been criticized like none other had Lamont Butler missed that shot, in that you don't have your best offensive lineup out there. Some people, which I was probably one of them, and maybe it's because Mike Bray never did this past season, I thought San Diego State should have fouled to extend the game. I thought they were going to get the ball back with like 4 seconds to go and have to go the length of the court.
Right.
John L. Davis went a little bit earlier than I thought FAU probably should have gone there. And then obviously Butler. There was a calmness to Butler in that moment that I don't think you typically see. I feel like you get guys in that moment that when they get stuck and he was kind of stuck there. I mean, hell, he almost stepped out of bounds. He was kind of stuck in no man's land. And all of a sudden, he doesn't like throw up some wild pass. He doesn't throw up some wild shot. He just kind of calmly, crosses back to his left And for the most part, that was probably an in-rhythm mid-range jumper.
Yeah, he kind of
for him.
He kind of almost reset the play. Does that make sense?
Which, again, guys with 3 seconds to go, 2 seconds to go, they don't do that. So, unbelievable. Obviously, when the shot went in, I thought about the villages in Florida and just the heartbreaking nature that not only they had to feel, for the first game, but eventually they had to feel, watching Miami. I'm sure there's other villages.
So what you're saying is when they woke up the next morning and saw what happened on the news, they were devastated.
Yeah. Anybody got the highlights that they can show me here? So tonight it will be UConn as you guys surprised by 7.5 point line?
Interesting. I was talking about this last night. I would say yes, except for San Diego State is so good defensively. You would think it'd be a little bit, to be honest with you, Kevin, I could see that being like a 10 or 11 point spread because of the way Connecticut's played. But San Diego State defensively, that's what's going to give. If San Diego State's going to have a shot in this game, which I think they could, it's going to be because of their defense.
Yeah, they need to really kind of muck it up. Obviously, they did an outstanding job against Alabama earlier in the tournament. And really, outside of the first half on Saturday, they've been great defensively all year long, and especially here as of late. But, man, again, UConn just they everybody out there is a threat, and everybody is a threat to do multiple things.
And quickly.
You watch them, and you're like, how the hell were they a 4 seed? How the hell did they lose as many games as they did?
Now, a lot of people would think that tonight's game simply is Connecticut against San Diego State. But it's more than that, because in our Jay's Lobster and Fish Market from the Garage Food Hall in the Bottle Works District in downtown Indianapolis, one of Indy Monthly's best restaurants, by the way, the Seafood Shack that's bringing a taste of the East Coast to Indiana. We have the gift cards to give away. Unless it is a 34-point spread tonight, Scotty will win for biggest blowout. He had UNC Asheville.
That's not our Scotty, right?
No.
That is correct. It's not our Scotty. Raphael has already secured with Princeton the double-digit seed to go the furthest, and then Paul versus Tom. Paul with Connecticut, Tom with San Diego State.
And we got a matchup in our bracket challenge as well, which will be for the final gift card. We have a tie going into tonight. Trevor. How about Trevor's got UConn to win it all?
That's impressive.
Trevor's got UConn to win it all, so obviously if they win, he will win because the other person, and I guess there's no really name associated, just Indy Fan 1. Indy Fan 1 had UConn in the title game, but had Purdue winning it all. But they are tied right now, so comes down to a UConn victory or not. I guess if there's a tie, how should we? If San Diego State wins, how should we divide that up? Should they both get one?
Well, here's how you say it. Who did you said somebody has UConn winning it, right?
And the Indy Fan 1 has Purdue.
Okay, the one that has UConn winning it. Who does he have them playing in the final?
He had Alabama.
Who did he have in the Final Four? How many Final Fours did he have correct? So that'll be our tiebreaker.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Who
guess
had the most Who had the most of the Final Four? Then the second tiebreaker would be who had the most of the Elite Eight, and moving backward.
Yeah, I don't know if they had any of them.
The pool, the high school pool that I was
outside
in,
behind UConn.
3 people had Connecticut.
Looks like he had FAU maybe. He had Alabama, Texas. Gosh, he should just get the gift card for having FAU.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so we'll see how that one plays out. Jake, you've worked in TV, obviously. Why the 9:20 tip?
The 9:20 tip would be because what that does is if it's 9:20 Eastern.
You want the peak time to be like 10:30 Eastern, 11 Eastern?
9:20 Eastern allows for it to be seen in prime time in all 4 time zones.
So why is the Super Bowl 6:30 kick then?
Probably because it's a Sunday, not a Monday. So prime time is not as applicable because it's a weekend as opposed to a weeknight.
Yeah, but is Sunday really viewed as a weekend?
The game that I recall, the first game that I remember being like one of the 9 o'clock tips, and I'm sure they had others before it, but the 1983 national championship game between the Phi Slamma Jamma Houston Cougars and North Carolina State and Jim Valvano. And I remember being at Little League baseball practice that day after school, because it was a Monday, and we were all talking about whose parents were going to let us stay up. which the answer was no one, because it was a 9 o'clock tip. It was being played in Albuquerque, so it was in the Mountain Time Zone. And I remember we were all like, well, yeah, my parents aren't going to let me stay up, mostly because it's going to be such a blowout. Like, why? There's no point. There was no game that was a bigger slam dunk, kind of like tonight, to be honest with you, where you're like, come on, I mean, this game's going to be a blowout. And then the next morning I got up and my dad's like, you're not going to believe this. But they won. North Carolina State beat them on a last-second dunk. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And my dad gave it kind of the quiet, I wanted to wake you up, but your mother wouldn't let me. But don't say a word. I'm like, okay.
You know, when you think to Houston championship games, and I mean the city, obviously Butler UConn was an awful championship game, but the last one there, pretty incredible. Villanova and North Carolina back in 2016, and the shooting that night was just at an absolutely absurd rate. North Carolina's over 60% from three. I think Villanova's over 50%, the Chris Jenkins shot. So you've kind of had two ends of the
Jenkins shot
here.
was Houston?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think a lot of people reference, Lamont Butler, it was a 2, not a 3, a little bit more to the right, but it was the same basket that you had that back in 2016. Did want to mention this. I saw Rick Bozich tweeted this late last night, Jake. Rick Bozich, longtime Louisville, kind of the Bob Kravitz of Louisville. He's covered IU basketball and covered the Knight era, Bob Knight era a lot. He tweeted last night, a letter went out tonight to former IU basketball players to pray for Bob Knight, the former Indiana coach. Said he has been hospitalized in Bloomington since Friday, but they hope he is home soon. I know Bob has certainly battled some health issues over the last few years, but I think anytime you see that, Jake, of like letter out to players, that something serious is going on.
Yeah, I mean Bob Knight was born in October of 1940, so that means that he obviously is 82 and a half years old.
Uh-huh.
And I would say probably and I don't know, without getting into too many specifics, when Knight came back and was honored in that Purdue game, I can tell you there was a sense of urgency from those very close to Bob Knight to do that then, because they didn't know how much and I don't mean from like a passing away standpoint, but just from an overall health standpoint, they knew the challenges that were going to be presented by trying to do that if they waited another season. And then, of course, if I'm not mistaken, that was right before the COVID year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that changes everything. But
maybe just a month before it all.
Yeah, you're right. That's what it was. It was 20. So they felt like they knew then, and I think people close to him have known that it's been a delicate situation with him for quite some time. So clearly you hope for the best. I mean, somebody that, boy, I'll tell you, if it is impossible to state to anyone who was not necessarily, living in Indiana at the time, the incredible influence of Bob Knight during his coaching tenure in Indiana. I have always said from a sports standpoint, he might have been, during his tenure, the most powerful man from a sports standpoint in any state in the United States towards that state. Towards whichever, like you take the most powerful person in each of the 50 states, Knight was more powerful than any of them were in their respective states in the other 49. I truly believe that, at his absolute apex.
And I don't think you'll ever see it again, just with how
Agreed.
The nature of
for
sports
a lot of
is.
reasons, yeah.
For many reasons. I don't even think necessarily Nick Saban would qualify as that in Alabama, and there might be some people in Alabama that would differ with that. But obviously, thinking about Bob Knight and the entire family there. The Pacers officially eliminated from the playoffs yesterday. They've got 3 to go, so they'll have the Knicks on Wednesday, the Pistons on Friday, then in New York to end the regular season coming up on Sunday. Again, the old tank continues for them. Well, one question I was curious about with, they continue to sit Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner. What if Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner had, significant contract incentives to reach?
We've seen that before, right, with players where the Colts have had that, right, Kevin, where in meaningless games they had guys go ahead and go out to try to get them
Like if the
contract
Pacers
incentive?
said, "Yeah, Tyrese, you're good. We'll just honor all those, but you just sit."
Well, that's possible. I would think that it would be from a team standpoint. It is not a good look if you are denying a player that opportunity, right?
Right, especially when it seems like you're denying them to play on the floor. Which again, I totally get it, and I'm a fan of it. And right now, they are 6th in the tank standings. It's a very close 5, 6, 7, 8. So that will be the thing to monitor here over the final week of the regular season. It is supposed to be, I think, a pretty warm Monday here in Indy. It looks like a really nice start. I know some, again, ugly weather in the forecast potentially tomorrow night into Wednesday, but temperature-wise, a good start to the week. A ton to get to on today's Kevin and Query. Kevin Bowen, Jake Query, Mark Dykton, live here, 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
All right, get your coffee in you. Tonight, it's a 9:20 tip. San Diego State and UConn for the men's national title in Houston. It's a 7.5-point favorite for UConn. Jake, 2018, the last time we've had a team in the title game that has won 5 straight by double digits. UConn has been absolutely dominant. And for San Diego State, they are on the heels of back-to-back 1-point victories. When we get to the 4-minute mark of the second half tonight, will it be interesting?
I think it will because, like I said, of San Diego State's defense. Maybe I'm being optimistic. San Diego State, Kevin, it's interesting, has been a really good program for the last 5 to 10 years. But because it's on the West Coast and because their best year was the COVID year that was shut down,
right?
We don't think of them as in that.
They don't play in the Pac-12. That obviously influences it. It'll be very interesting to see tonight if they are able to make the game ugly in any manner. I think that's been kind of their best way to slow things down. UConn, no one has been able to stop them whatsoever. It was crazy to think back. Obviously, the shot by Butler on Saturday night, you almost forget they were down 14 with 14 minutes to go, and they really got back in the game by just a bunch of offensive rebounds. Finally, the Florida Atlantic lack of height, I think, kind of caught up to them in that game. So tonight, again, it'll be San Diego State and UConn for the national championship.
Major League Baseball yesterday, it was the Reds over the Pirates 3-1. Cubs on the short end against the Brewers 9-5. Now, in our big race for the PBR, let's see, the Red Sox. Who did you have, Mark?
The Arizona Diamondbacks.
Somebody had the Red Sox, but then see, this is.
Wait, who had that?
Everybody in the building suddenly wanted part of our little game.
Oh yeah,
so
Kevin missed all that. That we've added like 4 more people.
Sox?
I feel like that's out.
Okay, you had the Arizona Diamondbacks.
I had the Diamondbacks.
I thought it was just our little family here.
You missed Friday. Yeah, there's like 5 more people now.
JMV wanted in, and then once he wanted in, that he
did he get the Dodgers?
He had like 9 coat tailors with him.
I'll take that underdog of the LA Dodgers.
I think
please.
the Astros might surprise some people this year.
The Diamondbacks 2-1 winners over the Dodgers. Okay, Kevin, you had.
I've got the Hot Athletics who won their first one, lost their last two.
The Oakland Athletics, were they idle yesterday?
No, I think they lost.
Idle beat them 2-0 in 7 innings. The Angels beat the Athletics 6-0.
In my opinion, that sucks.
Trout and Ohtani hit a home run.
And Red Sox 9-5 over Cute Fella. So
how about the Reds?
I told you 3-1 over the Pirates.
Now last year, Jake, they started 2-2 and lost 20 of 21. So should we maybe pump the brakes a little bit?
Are you saying not to get overly optimistic?
Are you saying April 3rd's not the time to start making plans for October?
Well, that's probably a good idea. Yeah.
It was awesome to be in that environment, though, Thursday. We didn't go to the game, but just downtown in Cincinnati on Thursday was awesome and great weather for opening day for the Reds. All right, the Pacers officially eliminated from the playoffs. They lose yesterday. They honestly played pretty well against Cleveland, who was at full strength for about 3 quarters, but Donovan Mitchell had 40 in that one. The Pacers did beat the Thunder on Friday night. I always feel this way about a Pacers season, like each of the last couple of years. I would say, Jake, there's probably like 2 to 3 games each year that I'm always just like, oh yeah, T.J. McConnell won the game for the Pacers. And Friday night was one of them against the Thunder. Like, he just has that effect. It doesn't happen on a night-in, night-out basis. But there's just one of these couple of nights a year where McConnell just takes over the game.
You're right.
Which I know sounds weird.
He brings an energy. Right.
But he did that on Friday night and was outstanding. But it will be all about the tank standings here over the final week. Again, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in the tank standings, separated by 1 game. The Pacers currently are in 6th in the draft order.
By the way, last night in the association, the Spurs scored 142 points in beating the Kings. My obsession with how Romeo Langford's doing. If San Antonio scored 142, how many of those were from Romeo Langford?
Well, my first question would be, did he play? I feel like he's always hurt.
I agree with that. But I'm looking this up because if there's ever a night where it's going to be like, okay, he broke out for, 16 points, it would have to be when they score 142 in a game, right? Romeo Langford, 8 points, 0 for 2 from the floor. 0 rebounds, 0 assists.
No, he had no points.
Right, that's what I said. What'd I say?
Oh, you said.
Oh, sorry.
8.
I'm a little tired.
8 minutes.
8 minutes, 0 for 2 from the floor, 0 for 1 from 3-point range, 0 rebounds, 0 assists, 1 steal, 2 turnovers, 1 foul.
Doug McDermott had 30 for him last night. How is Doug McDermott not on a contending team?
Yeah, you would think, right?
What is he doing on the Spurs?
Scoring 30.
I guess.
Major minutes. That's what he's doing. He's hanging out there.
Jake, yesterday I thought it was a terrific race, and
Great
again,
race.
I know that I'm very much like, casual IndyCar fan, sit on your couch and moan. Why don't we have more ovals? Find me a road course or a street race, Jake, that with 6 laps to go, you are saying white knuckle and Mark James is going nuts and all you guys, rightfully so. There was like 5 or 6 drivers that had a chance to win the race with 5 laps to go.
Now, wait a minute. I'm very flattered by this. Does that mean, did you just quote a phrase that I used, meaning that you actually might have heard part of the race?
I did. Maddie was a little under the weather yesterday, so post Children's Museum, went over to Meijer, did some grocery shopping, and so that meant you in my ears for, probably about 40 solid minutes. Outstanding job by all of you.
It's a lot of fun, and I appreciate that. It is fun to do. We were all there, and man, I mean, it's almost hard to call because it's just constant, right? The side by side,
and it's a shorter oval, right? So it's more compact.
Yeah, it's a mile and a half, and it's banked, so it's kind of like slot cars. The answer to your question, Kevin, in terms of why they don't do more ovals, I believe, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe the answer is simple, and that is, number one, there are some, I think, there were some politics of ownerships of racetracks and the competitive nature of that goes into it. And then secondly, ticket sales, quite frankly, because on a road or street course, for example, like Long Beach, you have tens of thousands of people that buy a ticket just because it's an environment, it's an atmosphere. It's, it's like when they have Irish Fest downtown. You're like, I'll go and get a Guinness, walk around, listen to music for an hour. You bought your ticket, right? Doesn't matter how into it you are, you bought your ticket. And ovals are fantastic, and they translate better on television, but they don't draw the crowds that a street course does. They don't sell the tickets.
They draw TV entertainment. I'll say that. Incredible.
Right
Joseph Newgarden, Edging Pato Award. After those two, it was Alex Palou, David Malukas, and Scott Dixon, 1 through 5. And again, LSU is your national champion on the women's side. Is that number 4 for Kim Mulkey? Did I see that?
I think that's right.
First at LSU, Caitlin Clark.
She can coach. Say what you want. She can coach.
Oh, certainly. Caitlin Clark was 9 of 22, was 8 of 19 from 3. She had 30 points, 8 assists. She did have 6 turnovers. Again, officiating-wise, LSU was really, I think, in control before the officiating took over, but disappointed to see that. Hopefully we do not get that tonight in the men's title game. Is this a big week for the Colts? We can chat about that on the other side. It is a nice start to this Monday here in Indianapolis. I think the temps are supposed to reach upper 60s today before the rain potentially tomorrow night. Kevin Bowen, Jake Query, Mark Dykton right here on 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
3.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
16 minutes before the hour of 8 o'clock. Good morning to you on a Monday and a good-looking start to the morning. Jake Corey along with Kevin Bowen, Mark Dykton here as well. Mark, who spent his entire weekend doing nothing but watching wrestling.
Hell yeah. Sorry for all those that follow me on Twitter that don't, because that's all my Twitter feed was.
Last night, pretty good, Mark?
Hell yeah.
You
Two
know,
good nights.
I love the hell yeah.
The Connecticut,
sound like a wrestling fan.
The Connecticut-Miami game, Twitter is not the end-all, be-all. I understand that. Sometimes it's probably a dangerous echo chamber or snow globe, but it seemed to me like more people were talking about the wrestling than talking about Connecticut and Miami.
Yeah, that's probably fairly accurate.
The other thing that happens...
couldn't really sustain after the first game.
Totally. No question.
And once UConn got up, what was it, 14-4 out of the gate?
Well, that's it. I mean, you kind of knew it was over right away, right? The other thing that happens in the world of sports is oftentimes, like I always liken it to the Indy 500. You know, you see one car for the first 50 laps of the race, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's that driver's day. And then something else happens, and another driver takes the lead, and you're like, it's that driver's day. They both look unbelievable. They kind of jostle back and forth, and then at the end of the race, you go, yeah, we probably should have known it was that driver all along. And I feel like the Colts quarterback chase is very similar to that, Kevin. Like, for a while, it seemed, you know, when Irsay made the comment about Bryce Young or simply said the Alabama guy, that was the slam dunk, no question. They're gonna do whatever they have to do. They're gonna move up and take Bryce Young. Then it was like, you know what, C.J. Stroud might be the number one quarterback in the draft. Then they stayed at 4, and now it's become basically Richardson Levis in most people's eyes. I have felt from the beginning Levis is the guy. Richardson seems now to be the guy that's the front runner. Thoughts?
We're going to have Nate Atkins on at 8:30, Jake, and he was at Anthony Richardson's pro day in Gainesville late last week. And I think a lot of Colts Twitter chatter around that event wasn't necessarily what Richardson did. I mean, hell, if you watch the Combine, you know Anthony Richardson in shorts and a T-shirt is going to wow you. That is exactly where he is at his best. But the Colts did have someone in attendance there by the name of Morocco Brown, which I know that name might not resonate with every single Colts fan. For those looking at the hierarchy within their front office, basically Chris Ballard, of course, is number 1 as GM. Ed Dodds would qualify as the number 2. And Morocco Brown, who has interviewed for some GM openings,
including the Bears.
Here, yes, thank you, Mark. Recently, he would be number 3 on that list. He just got a promotion. It's like chief personnel executive or, you know, something that looks really nice on the old business card. That is a far cry from what the Colts had at the Ohio State Pro Day or the Kentucky Pro Day, where it was really just the area scout. Just like the West Coast scout would be the only one at, you know, BYU's Pro Day or Oregon State's Pro Day. So that was, I think, something to note. You know, you could probably look at it one of two ways. You could look at it and say, all right, the Colts are sending one of their more important personnel people to Florida because they want to get more intel on not only Richardson, Florida has other draftable prospects. Or you could look at it as, are the Colts trying to smokescreen everybody? Are they trying to say, hey, look, Morocco Brown's at Florida, everybody. Hey, we got a lot of interest in Anthony Richardson. But yet they didn't send him to Kentucky. They just sent the Midwest area scout and Mike Lacey. This is like the push and pull, Jake, of this time of year. Is it lying? Is it not lying? Do you believe what these people are saying? Do you not? Do the actions speak louder than words? All of that has kind of run through my mind here over the last 72 hours.
You know, somebody asked me yesterday, and I'm sure you've been asked this a lot, Kevin. So are the Colts going to make a push for Lamar Jackson? And I think we now know that
I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I think we now know that's kind of already been silenced. But the same reason why I don't think that they make a push for Lamar Jackson, aside from the guaranteed money, is the same reason why I'm fascinated by this quarterback, the situation. And that is this. The Colts not making a play for Lamar Jackson, they can say that it's about the guaranteed money or it's about the question of Lamar Jackson's health. Those are both valid points. But I think, frankly, the main reason the Colts would not actually be in the running for Lamar Jackson is because the Colts know that they're not 2 to 3 years away. If the Colts were right on the let me rephrase that, a quarterback away. If the Colts felt like they had a legitimately great roster and were only a quarterback away from contending, they would make that move. And I think that's the mistake they made when they went out and got Carson Wentz. And frankly, a year later when they went out and got Matt Ryan, the Colts fooled themselves into believing that they were a quarterback away and that it was just add quarterback, mix, and then sit back and watch. And instead, it was just add quarterback, mix, and then watch everything go up in smoke because the other ingredients in the water actually aren't very good. And I think they finally, to their credit, realized that. And we're like, you know what? Without saying we're going to strip this down and start all over and start watering a seed again, that's exactly what we're going to do because they know that they are not a quarterback away right now. And because of that, Kevin, I think that they know that they have the flexibility to get a quarterback that maybe they can be a little more patient on, partially also because the AFC ain't opening up for 3 years anyway. So you might as well get a guy. If you got to get a guy that you even sit for a year to watch Gardner Minshew and slowly work him in, I think deep down they know that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I also think it's all about trying to create a window that is a decade long. And I know that's ambitious.
Well, and that's a decade long, though, means starting with a young quarterback, right? As opposed to, right.
Because Lamar Jackson in 8 years, I mean, hell, I think even less than that, is not going to be the same style, the same effectiveness, in my opinion, just based off his injury history and his playing style, that he has been in his early 20s. And even with that, you can obviously look at what Baltimore has experienced so far, and they haven't gotten, to the point that they would like to with, again, arguably, maybe not even arguably, a better roster than the Colts have. Matthew brings up a good point here. He goes, it matters zero who the Colts have pegged as the front runner. They get who the first three teams give them. That is true if they stay at 4.
Right.
But again, and that's been an issue that I've had. I think they should move up to 3 if there's any separation. I think that's what this week could be about, Jake. And again, going off Peter King this morning, Peter King mentioning that the Colts are working out Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis. So they are working out all 4 of those guys this week. And to me, this is kind of everything that the draft process has been gearing towards for the Colts. The combine is one thing, a pro day is one thing, but what are these guys like in a behind closed doors setting when your people are meeting face to face? There's not 31 other teams around you that are vying for their attention or for their time. Because you think about what Shane Steichen has said throughout this process. And, Shane Steichen's resume indicates it. Shane Steichen has worked with all shapes and sizes, all different types of quarterbacks physically, talent-wise, runners, pocket passers, et cetera, et cetera. But what he has always said is the one non-negotiable has got to be how you're wired. Well, this is when you find that out. This is when Shane Steichen especially finds that out. And I think this week could and will be, if there is a separator that evolves, it will happen this week. And if the Colts all of a sudden get to the end of the week and they feel like there is a quarterback that has separated him from, if there's a third one that separated himself from the fourth one, you have to trade up. You cannot run the risk of waiting any longer. We mentioned it late last week. If you believe those out in Vegas, right now, the Tennessee Titans rumored to trade up to that third pick, and possibly take Anthony Richardson. You can't run the risk of Matthews' scenario playing out of the other 3 teams choose who you're going to choose it for.
So do you think that Tennessee has already decided that they've seen enough of Malik Willis to know that he's not the guy?
Yeah. I don't know if it's like a slam dunk they know that, but when you have a new GM and that GM did not select Malik Willis, not to act like Malik Willis was some super high pick, but let's be honest, Jake, he was a 3rd-round pick. That was 1 round away from Jacob Eason. It's not like they have a ton tied into him. And again, when you're drafting 11, when you're stripping it down like Tennessee is, you've got to look at all avenues. But again, this sounds like a huge week for the Colts and exactly slotting what that order is. And for Shane Steichen and the others, how are you wired? What makes you tick? How do you process, what you're doing, Jake, and having these guys in for, private workouts, meetings, etc. You're getting them out of their comfort zone too. I mean, Anthony Richardson thrown indoors at Florida. He's with all his boys. He's in his familiar environment. They script exactly what the pro day is going to look like for him. Now you're getting them out of that. And we just mentioned the Colts have not had a huge contingent travel to these pro days. That, to me, is a clear indicator that this week is really, really important for them. And it makes sense. A week from today, they'll start their offseason program. So a week from today, Shane Steichen will be getting really his first taste of being the head coach of the Colts. They'll have a large chunk of their roster back in the building to start their offseason program. So this week is a perfect time to try and finalize whatever quarterback order you have.
Now you mentioned that yesterday you said you listened to some of the IndyCar broadcast, right, from Texas?
Yeah, I'd say at least over half.
Okay, and you said it was because you ran to Meyer for your wife, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious here. Does that mean that you actually put in earbuds while you were walking around Meyer, or did
Correct.
you go to the Meyer in Batesville?
No. Why the Meyer in Batesville?
Well, because I'm trying to figure out if you were in the car for 40 minutes. To go to Meyer.
I was going to say I was driving through Batesville on the way home on Saturday, but no, I rocked the earbuds and listened to you guys, and again, it was a great call.
I've always wondered this, and I'm not, and be honest.
Took me a few times to download the IndyCar app, by the way.
Is it confusing? Like when you listen on the radio, is it confusing what's going on because there's so much going on in the race?
No, I think you guys do a good job of making sure what battles are being fought for what position. You guys make that very clear because sometimes the best battle is 13 for 14 at this point. On a very close compacted track like Texas, at one point you guys are like, this is crazy. Scott Dixon is in 5th place and just got lapped by Pato Ward.
Right.
That, again, that to me doesn't really register. When I hear 5th, I'm like, he's just a half turn away from him. And then Mark doing a rundown of the order every so often, I think is really important as well. So
it does get hard. I'm out there. I'm looking at the track, and I mean the same thing for Mark. When we throw back and forth like that, like if you pick up a battle all of a sudden randomly, your eye is looking like, no, wait a minute, where are they? Because they're all just, once the leaders get into lap traffic, then it's like, oh man. I mean, you can get lost pretty quick.
I think the hardest part and not to compare like radio versus TV, because I did listen or I did watch on TV to the end. They just have more bodies than you guys have. Strategy is probably the one thing that I'm always needing to be kept abreast of
right.
Okay, who was on what tire strategy,
Fair.
who was on what fuel strategy. Now again, yesterday it worked out that Pelot was on much older tires than everybody else, but for the most part, any of those top 5 or 6 could have won, and I did think James Hinchcliffe and
Townsend Bell
and Lee Diffie did a really nice job in describing that at the end. But again, Jake, I know I'm the just common IndyCar fan. You get this question a lot, but maybe it's not 80%, 20% ovals, but can we get it to 60-40, 70-30 on the schedule?
Trust me, I'd love it. I love calling them.
And I know ownership, it's when you wreck, which obviously the intensity of the wrecks are much bigger. I mean, hell, we saw it yesterday with Devlin DeFrancesco and Graham Rahal late in the race. I understand from an ownership standpoint, they'd be like, hey, let me show you the crash damage that we have at ovals compared to road and street. But from a purely TV product, entertainment value, the ovals 1,000% better than road courses.
No argument. Nate Atkins going to join us at 8:30, is that right?
And I'm glad you're home safe.
Well, thank you. I am too.
Did you stop at Frisch's Big Boy on the way home? There's one more, right, in St. Leon or maybe East Central High School. Is there one by there?
Byron picked me up in Cincinnati, and I'm like, and we stopped in Shelbyville for gas, and
I thought you were going to say maybe the casino. Press your luck a little bit.
He actually said, you want to stop by? And I said, can you imagine the people that are probably in the casino at 11:40 on a Sunday night? But I asked if he wanted to visit the monument out front of the Jake Query Early Childhood Home in Shelbyville, and he was like, no, we're good. I said, okay.
Shocking he passed on that. When we were driving home, the Milan exit, Maddie referred to it as Milan.
Yeah, boy.
I probably have said that too. I'm not going to lie.
Milan Hoosiers, Mark?
I mean, I'm sure when I first came to Indy, that's how I pronounced it.
Well, I should be defending my wife here. She has lived here for all 33 years.
Now, you don't say Versailles, Indiana, do you?
No.
A little bit of Chicago action.
Versailles, right?
Close, yeah.
Nate Atkins in a half hour. And Matt Miller coming up at 9:30. The month of April is here, 3 weeks from Thursday, NFL Draft. So each of the next few Mondays will have a different kind of national draft voice on to get you set on what the order looks like right now and how the pundits are pegging things for the Colts at number 4. Again, a really nice start to this Monday here in Indianapolis. Kevin and Corey on 93.5, 107.5, The Fan. All right, 8 o'clock hour. Jake, 13 hours and 17 minutes until tip-off.
I'm going to sleep for like 10 of those.
You're going to wake up at tip-off. That's when you're going to get up.
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be rough. You guys, you think it's bad now. Wait till tomorrow when my body has no idea what time it is.
Well, the thing that I've done here over the past few years with, now that I think sleep is anyone's guess each night for me, I'm like, do I stay up for one shining moment? And I always feel like I have to.
No.
Well, why don't I just watch it on YouTube the next morning?
That's exactly what you should do.
Okay, two things about one shining moment.
Like, what do I need to see? The IU cheerleader taking the ball off the top of the goal again?
Will Indiana make an appearance in one shining moment?
Yeah, you'll have a Trace Jackson Davis
Think so?
moment. Yeah.
Okay. Will Purdue.
Certainly.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly.
Oh, yeah.
Florida Atlantic will. Or, Farley Dickinson will.
You will get audio from that game. You'll have, who was on the call? Debbie Antonin. I'm trying to think who did the game.
Yeah. Saying.
Was it Spiro, Andrew
History
Catalan?
repeats or whatever, yeah.
Fairleigh Dickinson will have a 20-second snippet of, if not more.
One shining moment, strangely enough, and I know I ask you guys this, or I point this out every year. I will do it again next year, if we're still here. But my favorite trivia question, the very first ever college basketball player featured in One Shining Moment.
You've asked this.
I feel like you've asked that, and I've completely forgotten what the answer
year.
is.
The very first year for One Shining Moment was 1987. The first thing that you saw was the Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket, and then the first player seen was Dwayne Shensis of Florida, the late Dwayne Shensis, former Pacer of Florida. The one thing about One Shining Moment, I probably said this last year, I get like this melancholic like sadness in watching it. You know, like another, it makes me, it harkens me back to like, I don't know, just like childhood, or it's like another part of the year is over with or whatever. And then the other thing that happens when I watch it is it reminds you how many games there are in the tournament, because it will show a play from round 1 or 2, and you think to yourself, like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Whereas when it happened, it was like everyone was talking about it, you know?
Like, I haven't seen the Furman buzzer beater
exactly.
almost buzzer beater in a couple weeks.
That's a prime example, right? I mean, when it happened, it was just huge.
Yeah, I guess I have a similar. I mean, first off, and I would think my wardrobe would give it away. This is probably my favorite sports week of the year, considering what we've got starting on Thursday in Augusta, Georgia. And I said this to Maddie, I think, a few nights ago, and boy, was she thrilled when I said it. I told her, like, appointment viewing for sports for me, it really ends this week, Jake. I mean, the Pacers are done. They're out of the playoffs. We don't have a Major League Baseball team here in town. I mean, sure, I will watch the Reds. I don't plan my nights around the Cincinnati Reds. NBA playoffs, same thing. I will watch.
Fair.
But, like, I'm not, going to be grinding out against give me the Knicks and Cavs series here. I really need to be locked into all 7 of those games. I guess a little bit is the product of the market that we're in. But once the Masters ends for me, and arguably once the Final Four, I guess if you're talking about nighttime, once the Final Four ends, I don't really have appointment sports television schedule at night until September.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Even NBA Finals and stuff?
I mean, I guess there are pockets of it. I will certainly watch it, but I won't have I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of a fandom element to it, which, again, I mean, tonight, am I really a fan? I just want a good game.
Right.
So, same thing with the finals. Like, when I get around to NBA Finals, Major League Baseball playoffs, keep the series going as long as possible. That's all I'm about. Like, tonight, I said it to Jake earlier in the show, when we get to that 4-minute media timeout, can we please have it be a game? Can we please have it be 1 or 2 possessions? And again, this is me probably reaching for something tonight. Like, I want to see this be a game. One thing that UConn has not had throughout this tournament, no one's put game pressure on them.
Mm-mm.
No one has made it a game with 4 minutes to go. What happens if San Diego State can do that tonight? Do we see UConn get a little bit, whatever, sporadic and not be as just dominant, smooth, calm? Really, it's been one of the more dominant runs in tournament history.
Okay, speaking of smooth and calm, I wanted to play the radio calls from San Diego State and Florida Atlantic on Saturday night. Now you have, is it Ken LaVecca? Is that his name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's the last one.
He is the Florida Atlantic play-by-play broadcaster, and I want to give him a tip of the cap.
He's speaking in the Villages later this week to recap the season, by the way.
Here's a guy that's the radio play-by-play voice of Florida Atlantic basketball, meaning that
the only guy. I mean, 17 years. There's no color announcer.
And do they have a huge fan base and a huge radio following? I don't know about that. So here you are, you're doing these games, and you have this moment where, oh my gosh, this team might actually be playing for a national championship in 2 days, and they need one stop. And then you have, on the other hand, the San Diego State announcer that they hit a shot that catapults them into one win away from a national title. And the San Diego State play-by-play guy,
Ted Leitner, by the way.
Yeah, he's the voice of the Padres. I mean, he's a legend in San Diego.
Christian?
Ted, don't call me Christian Leitner. To me, these are two totally contrasting calls, and I'll just simply say that. Here, the first one you are going to hear is from the San Diego State side. The other one is from the Florida Atlantic side. Here we go.
That's for sure. Here's Davis on the drive against AG. Puts it up short. Rebound, AG. AG got the rebound. Here are the Aztecs down 1, 4, 3. Lamont Butler. Pull-up jump shot. Good. They're storming the court. Who's going to the championship game? Not FAU. No. The San Diego State Aztecs are going to the NCAA championship game on Monday. How about them Aztecs? How about them boys? Pull-up jump shot off the baseline in the near wing. Nothing but net for Lamont Butler.
Mensah has it with 7 seconds left now. Butler up the near side with 5 with 4. Butler inside out dribble. Got to the right baseline with 2 with 1. Butler jumper for the win, and he made it. And San Diego State is going to the national championship game. Butler got it to go on a pull-up jumper.
I thought the second call was much more. You knew exactly where he was shooting it from. You knew exactly how much time was left. You knew who shot it. I just thought he did a good job. I thought it was
probably more my style. The second one, first one again to me has got more like a Vegas feel to it, and I don't know. Maybe that's Mr. Leitner's style. I keep on going back to Brian Dutcher not taking that time out with his 2 leading scorers on the bench, and I guess I understand his rationale in thinking, get the rebound, get it up floor. He mentioned like, hey, I've got my 3 bigs in the game. We've got a chance for an offensive rebound. But when you think back to that game, Matt Bradley was the only reason they even stayed in it for long stretches. And he's got him on the bench. And the calmness by Butler in that moment. When he got in the corner, that is when I was like, this is over. Because at that point, he wasn't getting a shot up anytime soon. So your offensive rebound was gone. The high percentage shot seemed to be doomed at that point. I honestly thought he would make another pass. I thought there was maybe a chance Dutcher would take a timeout at that point. If he gets kind of stuck in that baseline, you take a timeout, there's 2.5 seconds to go, and maybe you throw a lob or you get Bradley in the game, and he's the one taking the shot. But then all of a sudden, he just kind of calmly, crossed over. I forget if it was between his legs or not, and got back to like an in rhythm moment and stepped into a mid-range shot. And
I mean, it was impressive.
First true buzzer beater of the tournament there by Lamont Butler.
How much time was left when he let go of it? Like 0.6 probably?
Yeah, it was one of those where you knew we got it off in time, but obviously no time for Florida Atlantic after that. And boy, John L. Davis, the kid from Gary, he really, really struggled in that game. A kid who was, I thought, pretty good for San Diego State. You remember the technical they had in the second half? The San Diego State kid threw his elbow into the Florida Atlantic guy stomach, and they called the tech. He came back and hit some big threes for them because they are not, Jake, they're not built to come back from 14 down. They don't shoot a bunch of threes. Right. They're not fast.
Yeah, they are correct. Their aggressive style of play is what keeps them in games.
They grind it out, and really the offensive glass. I mean, they were huge offensive rebounding wise, and I will be curious. And I know this is a cliche, Jake, we hear a lot of times around the NBA draft. How many times when the NBA draft rolls around do you hear about length and wingspan and all of that? I do think you watch San Diego State play, and that's a huge reason why they're annually really good, especially on the defensive end of the floor. They just have a bunch of grown men. They're not the most skilled team, but they just have a bunch of grown dudes that oftentimes their defenses are calling card and throw it up there and go chase it.
You mentioned Davis struggling a little bit for Florida Atlantic. To be fair, Nigel Pack the same for Miami, right? I mean, that was a rough outing for him.
How about him losing his shoes? Did the NIL not pay for another pair of shoes?
That's unbelievable, isn't it? Like, the equipment manager, I saw somebody say, I mean, the guy's last name is Pack. How could you forget to do exactly that if you're the equipment manager, right?
Well, plus, I'm also thinking, shouldn't Nigel Pack just run back to the locker room with the equipment manager to, like, if there's 4 pairs of shoes back there, just try them all on back there.
Right.
And then come. It's not like you need to be on the bench. I also was thinking back to, I remember that happening to Butler. Joel Cornette in a tournament game, that happening to him. And that was one of those moments where, I don't know, maybe they don't have the walk-on the same size of Nigel Pack, but you know, wouldn't you think somebody on that bench has the same shoe size of him that doesn't get in the game?
That's a really good point. Would you put on somebody else's shoes? It's kind of gross, right?
It's the Final Four.
I guess you do it every time you bowl. Do they have that little spray can?
Yeah, can you go back to the locker room and give me the spray can before I go back in the game?
The greatest disinfectant of all time, obviously.
We're down 13 right now. Can you mind waiting a few minutes?
When I was in middle school, we had twins. I won't say any names, but I had twins on our roster, and one was having a really good game but picked up 3 first-half fouls, and they switched jerseys at halftime.
Oh, boy. Look at that. No integrity at North Central.
Yeah.
No wonder you guys always won.
Hail our cheating Panthers.
Yes.
It was
thank
Eastwood.
You, Mark.
I was in middle school.
Oh, even worse.
Beastwood, shall I say.
Cheatwood.
Yeah.
Over
Come
there
on
in
now.
Washington Township.
By the way, this question came to me yesterday.
Give us some names on that.
Yeah, I'm sure the statute of limitations is passed at this point.
Well, they might be known around town. They're twins. We went to Eastwood together. Hey,
right,
Jake.
Mark, Mike Byron. Who are the other names we've been jotting down over the years?
Farkas, does he have a twin?
They live next door to Farkas.
Oh, boy.
Hey, Jake, please take a segment to explain the IndyCar rules on when drivers can or can't pit, what waiver rounds are, closed pits, and so on. Please explain bad and good times for a yellow flag. It's good questions. And without boring everybody with an entire segment on it, I will simply say this, because it does get a little bit confusing, to me even, for that matter. When a caution comes out, and a caution flag comes out for usually one of 3 reasons, either because the league has noticed debris on the track, or because there is an accident or a car that has, for some reason, stalled or gone off pace. So when that happens, immediately when the caution comes out, the pits are closed. You cannot come in and pit. When it first opens, the pits open for cars on the lead lap only in the beginning. So for the first lap that the pits are open, it is for cars on the lead lap. That essentially is twofold. I guess somewhat to reward those that are on the lead lap, but also to avoid, because it gets, I mean, dangerous is probably the wrong word, but it's very easy for cars to get collected on pit road. So it kind of sorts that out. And if you are on the lead lap, you have the first right of choice as to whether or not you want to go onto pit road. The wave around is what's called when anybody that's in front of the leader, the lap before they go to green, in terms of the running order on the track itself, they wave them around to put them back to the back of the field, and the reason for that, so that it is somewhat of an advantage for those cars, but that is so that when they go green, the leaders all are within sight of one another, with no cars in between, to obviously make it for more excitement at the front of the field. In terms of the best time to pit, when there's a yellow, or when you hear people say, like, oh, that was a bad time to pit, you want to make your pit stops, if possible, during a caution, because during a caution, everybody's behind the pace car, and there is a speed limit on how fast people can go. So clearly, when you come in to get service to your car or get fuel, your competitors are out on the track, but they're doing so at 1/4 the speed that they would be doing so if you pit under green. So if you pit under green, if Kevin and I are in the race together and Kevin stays out on the track and I come in for a pit, we both need to pit. I come in, Kevin stays out under green. He's turning laps at 220 miles an hour while I'm sitting getting service. I come out onto the track, and as soon as I come out, a caution happens. Kevin is celebrating because that means he can come in and pit when I'm forced, while he's getting service, I'm forced to be driving around at 60 miles an hour, and he loses less track time. There's your answers.
Give me a few more ovals. Just a few. I understand crash damage, all that. Buddy of mine who's definitely an IndyCar fan mentioned earlier, you get more eyes on TV. Naturally, that's how you're going to get more people to show up to the actual race. I don't think you can reverse it and hope that it's kind of the other way around. But when you look at the split right now in terms of how many ovals there are, not enough, in my opinion, and just such an entertaining race yesterday in Texas. One thing I wanted to mention before we get to Nate Atkins here coming up. Again, he was at the Anthony Richardson Pro Day in Gainesville late last week. Jalen Hood-Schifino, Jake, officially declaring for the draft. That happened after we got off air on Friday. Do we get to the midway point of round one before Jalen Hood-Schifino's name gets called?
I think that's right around when it's going to be, right? I would say, if I had to, I would say 13 to 17 is where I would slot him right now.
Why don't you do a tankathon and find out?
Oh, well, here, let's. Thank you for asking, Mark. Let's do that.
You've done it for the Pacers pick. You might as well see where Jalen Hood-Schifino is
6 right now. The Pacers in the Tankathon standings again. 5, 6, 7, 8 separated by 1 game. So
we're doing this one just to see where Hood-Schifino goes, not to see where the Pacers land, right? The Pacers right now.
You could do both.
You said 6th, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, here we go. With the 16th pick.
I was going to say you were scrolling a bit
and
there.
And the 2023 NBA mock Tankathon draft. Sorry, I'm tired.
Wasn't your best.
So, okay.
You want me to do it again?
Yeah, we're going to do it. I'll do the whole Tankathon again. Okay, go ahead.
Can you rewind that, Mark?
With the 16th pick and the 2023 NBA Tankathon draft, the New Orleans Pelicans select Jalen Hood-Schifino from the University of Indiana. By the way, with that mock that I just did, the Pacers drafting 4th, taking Asar Thompson out of Overtime Elite, a 6'7", 20-year-old that averaged 21 points a game.
Brothers, right? Him and his brother are both supposed to go in the
his
top
brother,
top 10.
A sweet? A sour, a sweet? No?
What's? Thank you. Amen Thompson, 6th pick in the draft to the Houston Rockets.
When I saw the Hood-Schifino official declaration, I guess a couple things kind of I was thinking about. You look back on that Miami law, and I bring up the Miami game because it was the last game IU played this year. Jake, Indiana, if you look at how many points they scored in that game, 69 points, they will lose 61 of those 69 points.
Yeah, I mean,
Trey Galloway had 8. He comes back. Malik Renew had none. Obviously, Malik Renew, you would expect, is going to be a much bigger score for you. It's just a reminder of that Monday, I guess 2 weeks ago, when we talked about Indiana after that game. It's just such a stinging loss because, again, you lose so much. And the portal can offer a lot of good, but it can offer a lot of bad.
Yeah, you're right.
And banking on 3 or 4 impact guys out of the portal, boy, it's just wishful thinking.
And I mean, Kevin, in the portal, you're getting guys that are going to give you what, maybe 1 or 2 years. So then you're right back to square one again, right?
And the other thing I did think about it, and this has got to be huge for Mike Woodson moving forward, because Jalen Hood-Schifino came from Monteverde Academy, which, by all accounts is the new Oak Hill. I mean, it is, a handful of D1 guys every year. I know there's a kid, Liam McNeely, that I use really high on in the next class. Jake, it's not like when Jalen Hood-Schifino showed up on campus in Bloomington, it was like, oh yeah, slam dunk lottery pick, he's only going to be here for 1 year. I mean, yeah, he was a 5-star, but and Jalen Hood-Schifino, I thought his statement said this. I mean, he was effusive in his praise about Mike Woodson and how the Indiana staff allowed him to, kind of play his game. And obviously he had the position switch when Xavier Johnson got hurt and still, had a really nice freshman season as Big Ten Freshman of the Year. I do think that is something that Indiana can pitch to future recruits or members of the portal and say, look what happened here. This guy came here for 1 year. He didn't just run off after a year. He got better here. He, maybe was a fringe first rounder, maybe not even leave after his freshman year, and now he's being talked about as a fringe lottery pick. I do think that is something that, should be beneficial
now
for Indiana.
Do you think, and I don't know this, I have not heard, it doesn't appear as though he is going to be tempted by it, but Zach Edey's name is now in mock drafts as a second rounder. 3 months ago, he was not thought of at all as being an NBA player.
He was short and sweet this weekend when talking about it, right?
This mock draft has him going 44th.
I believe he just offered 4 words this weekend. He was in Houston, collecting all the hardware for National Player of the Year, and when asked about it, he just said, I have no clue on his future. The longer he waits, is that bad for Purdue? Is he waiting on NIL?
I think it's probably good.
Confirmation?
Right?
Like how?
Yeah, probably, but I think it's probably good. I mean, he probably can make... He's an interesting one because from the NIL standpoint, he may make more next year as a college player than he would for an NBA salary, and as a second rounder, it would be non-guaranteed. Whereas like a Jalen Hood-Schifino, people are like, he needs to go back and develop his game. I'm like, listen, Jalen Hood-Schifino is going to do a better job developing his game, practicing throwing lobs to Zion Williamson every day, and then going into games and being guarded by Kawhi Leonard than he is getting ready to play at Minnesota. And if he gets hurt, if he's a first rounder, it's guaranteed money. You have to do it. You just do.
I think a chance for him to be kind of a more dynamic Malcolm Brogdon at the next level. I think he plays with really nice pace. And again, with Xavier Johnson getting hurt, the ability to play some point guard probably will entice him to some NBA teams as well. All right, Nate Atkins in 5. Let's hit a morning check down.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
We'll begin with the association. Last night, Cleveland over the Pacers, 115-105. Donovan Mitchell with 40 last night. Darius Garland had 20. Pacers now officially eliminated from the postseason. Benedict Mathurin did have 19. T.J. McConnell had 16. Kevin, were you celebrating the fact that the tragic number finally hit?
Well, I think it's a good thing. I tweeted last night. I look at this season as pretty close to a roaring success for the Pacers. You found pieces in Mathurin and Halliburton's case that I would consider kind of major pieces. You found some complementary guys as well. I think Jordan Nwora fits into that group. Aaron Nesmith, Andrew Nembhard. You experience some winning. You experience some great late-game moments. That's important for a young group. But at the same time, you have clinched that pick that in all likelihood is going to be in the top 10, maybe even the top 5, and that you can make the case is the most important part.
Jordan Nwora, when I have watched, he sits on the bench and he says like to Benedict Mathurin, great shot. And then he says to T.J. McConnell, nice shoes. Then he says to Miles Turner, love the hair. You know why?
I do not.
He's a complimentary piece.
In my opinion, that sucked.
I had my finger on the trigger on that one.
What?
You almost said it kind of mid-Jake statement there.
Yeah.
Which I thought was well said.
I saw where you're heading us to water, and I was like, I can figure where this is going.
Listen, you guys are getting this on 3 hours sleep. Can you imagine? Do you ever just thank yourself that you have access to this?
Some would say you're on 3 hours of sleep a lot of the time during the show.
We've got 3 undefeated teams left in Major League Baseball. Can we name them?
Yes. The 3 undefeated teams in Major League Baseball. New York Yankees.
Okay.
I'll go Yankees. Colorado Rockies and the Detroit Tigers. Mark?
Oh, boy. Give me the Cardinals, the Royals, and the Mets.
What do we got?
I think we got a loud buzzer for all 6 of those. All in the AL, the Rays, the Twins, and the Rangers.
The Twins are undefeated because they switched jerseys at halftime.
Indianapolis Indians, the Ofer.
What?
In my opinion, that sucked.
What was wrong? That wasn't even trying to be funny. It was just a comment.
Mark, did you go Friday night to Victory Field?
I went Friday and I went Sunday.
Oh, you got the beer bat was there, right?
Oh boy, was it!
Freshly stocked.
Oh yeah.
Are you wishing you had one now?
Oh, man.
Yeah, Mark,
I could double fist one right now.
Monday day game over
Victory
there, Mark?
Field wants to send 2 over. I'll take both.
They're off today in Louisville all week for the Indians.
Rough weekend for the Indians, though. Lost 2 out of 3.
0-3.
Or all 3, yeah.
Jake, we kind of were wishing he would stay in Texas, honestly, after the effort he's given the last few minutes here. Jake, you were in Texas yesterday for the IndyCar race, and some great theater, especially late.
It was a great race. Pata Award looked absolutely unbeatable for the first 3 quarters of that race, but Joseph Newgarden clearly had a really good car as well, and it came down to, I thought, just a fantastic finish for the last, 15 or 20 laps, where they were essentially running side by side, and it was going to be a matter of which one probably just took the high line and used a draft at the end of the race. Late caution due to an accident from Romain Grosjean that allowed Joseph Newgarden to get the win. Newgarden, by the way, now has tied a record of Johnny Rutherford and Bobby Unser for most consecutive seasons with an oval win in open wheel racing. Those 2 guys combined for 5 Indy 500s during their streaks, 8 straight years with an oval win for Joseph Newgarden.
He would like the oval one coming up here in a little bit over a month. Lastly, the women's national title yesterday, LSU, a championship game record. They score 102. I know a lot of people want to talk about officiating, which I did think was pretty poor. A lot of people want to talk about sportsmanship at the end of the game. If that was the men's game, it wouldn't even be a topic, frankly. How about how LSU played? They had 3 girls score 20 or more, and none of them were their best player in Angel Reese. Caitlin Clark was 9 of 22, 8 of 19 from 3. She had 30 points, 8 assists, and 6 turnovers. Basically, I thought Iowa was pretty much down 8 or 10 before the foul trouble really became a storyline. Hell of a performance by LSU, and Kim Mulkey gets her 4th national title. There was one point where I thought she was swinging at the ref, and they didn't call a tech for that.
You know what? She's kind of Tom Crean, isn't she?
Well, maybe in antics, I would say the coaching resume is a little different.
Fair. But, I mean, just in terms of
yes, there were moments.
Are you trying to guard somebody?
There's the infamous Crean picture at Penn State where it looks like he's guarding Tim Frazier on the floor. There were some moments yesterday where I'm like, is Kim Mulkey guarding Caitlin Clark?
Do you think Tom Crean's coaching days are done? He does a good job on television.
Yeah, I agree. I think he does a really nice job on television. Does a nice job, I think, on Twitter as well. No. Tom Crean will give it one more run. He will coach Western Kentucky.
That's probably a pretty good call.
Speaking of Kentucky, Nate Atkins was at the Kentucky Pro Day. He was at the Ohio State Pro Day, and he was also at the Florida Pro Day late last week. What did he observe from Anthony Richardson? We'll chat about that next with him right here on 93.5, 107.5, The Fan.
This is a
think you could make the argument that our next guest has spent more time at quarterback pro days than important members of the Colts organization here over the last couple of weeks. Kind of odd how that has played out. But Nate Atkins from the Indianapolis Star has been a busy man in late March. Anthony Richardson's pro day in Gainesville late last week. Nate joins us now to chat more about that. And I guess let's start there, Nate. You know, when you were at Ohio State, when you were at Lexington, Mike Lacey, the Midwest area scout for the Colts, was present. That was really it from a personnel standpoint. We obviously saw Carolina, Seattle, among other teams, bring a whole lot of important people. And then in Gainesville, it was Morocco Brown, who, you know, if you're going to make a family tree, or I guess more of a hierarchy of personnel people in the Colts front office, Morocco Brown would be third in charge behind Chris Bauer and Ed Dodds. What, if any, do you make of the Colts sending an important person to Gainesville, but not as important to Ohio State and Kentucky?
You know, I was interested to see Morocco at Anthony's pro day because they normally just rely on sort of the area scout to do these. That's why Mike Lacey was at the other two. But, you know, I knew he wasn't going to go down to Gainesville because it wasn't his area. So it's just kind of the way that it divided up in a lot of ways, probably. So I don't read a ton into that. It is just interesting that, like you mentioned, those other teams, Seattle and Carolina, sent their top guys to every single one of these. And you can read into why. Like Seattle, there's a lot of there's noise that they might trade up, but there's also noise that maybe they're just trying to get other teams to trade up. So some of it's for appearance. But I was a little surprised that the Colts didn't have more people at these pro days, just because of how big this decision was. And if you gain even maybe 5%, 10% more understanding of kind of who a player is and what he means to his teammates and coaches in his environment, I think that's helpful. So the whole thing was a little surprising to me.
Nate, what's interesting to me is, Nate Atkins is our guest, by the way, on the Payless Stickers hotline. What's interesting to me is oftentimes and I think maybe we just naturally default to this, we sit there and we assume that the Colts are smoke screening and playing cat and mouse and being vague and coy. And then when it's all said and done, we look back at it and go, you know, they pretty much said this is exactly what was going to happen. If that were the case in this scenario, the indications would lead towards which quarterback being the guy that's the guy.
I think if you want to take it back to just the things that they've said and lined out in a quarterback, and the most likely scenario is, if you're just going to go off that, is probably Will Levis. Will Levis has fit a lot of what they talk about just on a kind of personal level, the obsession that Shane Steichen brings up all the time, and just the kind of command that he has for a team. That's kind of what stood out to me going to Lexington, was every player or coach you asked about Will Levis, like the second you said that name, there was sort of like a light in their eyes. And it was almost just like Kentucky does not often get something like this, but that's something they felt like they needed, that leader, that guy that kind of had the tools and traits that could match up with anybody in the SEC. And obviously at times it didn't all come together, but what they seemed to respect in him even more was kind of how he handled the adversity. And we heard so much about that's a program built on self-awareness and kind of working through disadvantages, because that's their existence in the SEC. And they just really loved how Will came in there and kind of made that program his own as a transfer from Penn State. And they win 10 games his first year there. It's the ties the most wins they've had in like 4 decades. And last year did not go as well, but you know, it could have got a lot worse. Nightmare seasons in the SEC usually end up worse than 7 and 6. And so it's kind of, there's an interesting context when you're actually there and understanding what he meant to them, but also the fact that they're not disillusioned to the struggles that they had and in the way they believe that made Will Levis better. So I think he probably fits that, and I mean that in the sense of he's got that with kind of all these healthy traits they look for, as far as the build in a quarterback and the ability to make plays. If you just take it on a further level, just the basic description they have is a lot of Hendon Hooker. You just wonder if the injury changes a lot of that. But Hendon Hooker, not to get too sidetracked, but he did a lot of the stuff Will Levis did. He just did it at a higher level and for 2 years at Tennessee, to where they beat Alabama last year and win 10 games. So really there was a lot with Hendon Hooker that I thought tied into especially the way that Chris Ballard talks about the position. The difference there, though, is, the traits, the things they're looking for in a quarterback are not currently present in him because of the ACL or because of the knee injury. And so it's hard to read kind of how much that's going to matter to them. And obviously, if they're picking it number 4, I mean, it has to matter. They have to, they have to believe in the investment they're getting. So that's why I put Will Levis a little bit higher there. But I think there's definitely a world where Hendon Hooker fits a lot of that as well. And then Anthony Richardson's more of a guy that, they're looking for those things in, and they may have found them. There's a lot to learn about Anthony. We just don't have the body of work to know this on the same level as these other guys. But that's why I consider them all very much in the conversation. But that's kind of how I'd pick it right now.
Okay, Nate Atkins is with us from the Indianapolis Star. He has been a busy man traveling around to pro days here over the last couple of weeks. I want to focus on Richardson and Levis here for just a second, Nate. When we've heard Shane Steichen talk, I think a lot of the separator for him will come neck up. How are these guys wired? What makes them tick, et cetera, et cetera. But I think physically he's mentioned accuracy, and how that, translates at the next level. If you look at the sheer numbers, Will Levis 64% in college, Anthony Richardson 54%. I'm curious if you've taken any sort of deep dive into that. Was Richardson a guy that threw more balls down the field? Did Levis throw more balls, near or behind the line of scrimmage? Anything you can speak to when it comes down to just those sheer accuracy numbers?
Yeah, I think on a down-to-down accuracy scale, Will Levis is ahead of Anthony Richardson. He's been in more offenses. He's been in 3 different systems in 3 years, and the last 2 at Kentucky have been much more like what you see at the pro level. It mirrors a lot of kind of what teams like the Rams and 49ers and Vikings and Browns do with some of the under center play action, kind of wide zone run scheme type of stuff. There's just a lot more that they get to in terms of progressions and reads and things like that. Whereas I think Anthony Richardson, it was all just so new. They went from Dan Mullen to Billy Napier, kind of scrapped a new offense, and then threw him in as a first-year starter. And I just think they never really built up much of anything. And, that really came out, I think, in just kind of what to trust in the passing game level. The receivers never quite were on the same page with Anthony Richardson. And so I think what ended up happening is just at times the strength of their team was the offensive line, the ability to run with Richardson and the backs that they have. But when it came to time to pass, they just kind of put a lot on Anthony to just go there and create. And when it gets to that level, that's more create down the field and create kind of with his legs, throws on the run, these extended plays that would be more difficult plays to pull off. And so those are some of the ones where when there's nobody else in the field they're throwing on air, those were the impressive throws that Anthony Richardson had, just the ability to get the ball down the field as far as he did, accurately on the move. He showed a lot of that. But it's when you're trying to do that against SEC competition and they have better players than you do, that's when I think that completion percentage kind of stays low. And I just don't think that they developed enough or maybe had enough time to get there with this young quarterback to where, they had these set plays that would get him in a rhythm and get him going. And you even saw that a little bit in just his throwing session, is that even some of the easy plays when he would drop back and throw like a hitch route, slant route, swing out of the backfield, sometimes those would be the passes that would be off for him. And it almost was like there's just sort of a lack of reps, lack of continuity in those kind of plays for him. It's a lot of the stuff that I remember I used to see in Josh Allen, where they just hadn't built that into their offense. They didn't trust it, so they didn't run enough, so it wasn't as crisp as it should be. So I think that there's reason for concern with Anthony on that level, but at the same time, he just didn't get to that part of the progression and was, in a situation where the way they were playing wasn't going to be high percentage in the SEC.
Nate, what do you make, if anything? I don't know if you saw the Peter King report earlier today, but him saying that the Colts are going to work out all 4 of these QBs, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. They'll work out all 4 this week. Just your general thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So they're going to work out all 4 in person while not sending their top personnel to any of the 4. It just feels like a way to kind of keep it consistent. That's just the way they've chosen to do it, invest in the scouts at the pro days, but really dive in on them one-on-one in the facility. And I know they've always really, really valued that with all draft prospects, this feeling of when you're here at our facility, and we're in conversation, and we're in meetings, and then we're in workouts. Kind of how do you operate? How do you come across to everybody? And they kind of get this big picture look at it. This is going to be a very involved process for them, like it was for the head coaching search, where they bring in kind of all the voices they trust within the organization to give some level of input. And at the end of the day, it's Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay and Shane Steichen are mostly, are going to be the three that work through it. And ultimately, it'll be Chris Ballard's call. But Chris Ballard leans on kind of all these people to give some kind of insight into what they're seeing as far as, what this person could offer on a day-to-day basis. So I guess they're just trying to get, to really put everything on that they're going to study and learn from as many people they can talk to. I know they've done homework on these guys, talking to all the people around them, the people in their background, trying to get a sense of what their day-to-day routine is. And then they want them to almost sort of display it there on a home visit and or an in-house visit and just compare the four across the board. It's interesting since it sure seems like at least one, if not two of those quarterbacks are not really realistic for them anymore. But, we talk about not tipping their hand and just they laid it out that they're going to look at all of them. This is their method of doing that.
Nate, was there any moment during any of the workouts that you've seen where you saw an incident of a body language or kind of in other words, everybody's down there and they're watching the way a guy throws, they're watching the footwork, whatever else, be it good or bad? Was there anything at all from any of the prospects that tipped their hand as to just what kind of guy they are, where you thought, that's interesting?
Yeah, I think there were moments like that for all three of them. Specifically like with Will Levis, he was throwing he's throwing these receivers who really, really wanted to put on a show for him. But, they're running these difficult routes. They're running these deep wheel routes and these fades that go, 60 yards down the field, or right when they turn out their break. It's sort of the hardest throwing ball you'll see on a football field. And some of them would just, they didn't always connect. And he was at times sort of, he's laboring through this throwing session at the end and throwing these hard passes. They weren't all being caught. And I just kind of noticed how much his receivers were bothered when they didn't catch it, whether it was their fault, whether it was slightly off, whatever it was. They might get 1 foot in bounds but not two, but they got really upset at themselves for not delivering there because, like I said, every time you bring up Will Levis to anybody there, it's almost like you brought up someone incredibly personal to them. And these are guys that are going to come back to Kentucky. Most of them, they're going to play with some other quarterback. This guy is going to go somewhere in the first round, and a lot of other factors will be out of their hands. But they really felt like they owed it on that day to give Will Levis the best chance. And they were almost kind of just like grateful that he brought all this attention, cameras, NFL Network, all of that to them. And so there's sort of definitely a leadership feel I had that day from Will Levis. The other two, I just think they showed little bits of their personality throughout this. Will Levis, like I said, he at the same time, there's always this feel with him, and I'm curious how it comes off the teams, is that he's a super confident guy, and he talks about, he talks about, the struggles and the adversity is like, this has been a positive and it's built me in this way. And I guess you could look at that and think like, when he talks about having a cannon and how great his arm is, that maybe that comes off like it's not his fault. But he also, when you really dive into it when you match up with these teammates, I think you see that it's more like he decided he was the one to lead them, and he's going to lead them with confidence. And if it's too much, it's too much, but it's not too much for them. So I thought that came out from his teammates pretty well. And then the other two, I think, they showed sort of their levels of confidence, ego, and comfort kind of in their own ways. C.J. Stroud not running the 40, I just thought was interesting because he came out at the Combine and said his goal in this process was to prove his athleticism, and if any teams had any questions, he was going to put them to rest. And then, so I was just curious why he didn't run that after saying that, and he just sort of like very confidently kind of laughed it off and just said, well, the teams that I'm talking to don't need me to run it. And that to me kind of indicated that he knew he was going pretty high in the draft and that he was kind of having this singular focus of like, I'm going to double, triple down on what I'm really best at, which is throwing. I'm going to throw some on the move. And I'm going to trust that the team that takes me is going to dive into the film, dive into my last game against Georgia and understand that. And I won't need to run a drill in order to be the guy for them. there was just such a confidence that he's going to show up and be that person. And then I think for Anthony Richardson, it was sort of like, levels of just, he was just so in such a happy mood and such a good zone being in his backyard in Gainesville, throwing these routes to guys that he played with, and he's kind of on the doorstep of a dream here. And everything was so like, there was no nerves or sort of frustration from him. Even at one point, he throws the ball and he hits the rafter at the indoor facility the same way Will Levis did, and just immediately he starts cracking up. And later he talks about it and he said, well, I saw Will Levis do it, so I tried to throw a little bit harder. I think it was just sort of him playing that off a little bit. But that just shows you, like, he lives on such joy with this stuff, and these plays that don't all come together exactly the way they're supposed to. He just sees it as like he's a young quarterback who's going through it a little bit, and he hopes that you're gonna buy into the athleticism and the upside and understand this guy's 20 years old, and it's not going to be all there right now, but he is that confident that it's going to get there because he has all these skills, and he believes he's going to put in the time and the work ethic. And it was just interesting to hear him really light up when you talk about the things he's able to do, the difference, the rare traits he has. And then if you kind of brought up any of these kind of negatives and concerns, it was almost sort of brushed off as, well, that's the thought that's out there, but wait till they actually let it play out and see how I'm going to do this. It was a very different approach than Will Levis, who's kind of very, almost, I wouldn't say bristling at the criticism, but very, very aware of it and addressing it head on. It was just two different levels of approach there, but two guys who were, a few years apart and several years apart in playing experience that just kind of showed the level of trajectory they're on right now.
Nate, last one from me. And again, Nate Atkins for the Indianapolis Stars with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Whether it's Lamar Jackson's reportedly public demands, what he wants financially, or the asking price that, Baltimore has with that non-exclusive franchise tag, I just don't view the Colts that realistically involved with Lamar Jackson right now. What do you think would need to change? And I don't know, maybe you feel differently, but what do you think would need to change for Lamar Jackson and the Colts to be something that is realistic?
Yeah, I'm with you, Kevin. I thought it was more realistic kind of before I heard Jim Irsay's comments at the owners' meetings, and only because at the end of the day, like everything else, Jim Irsay holds the final keys on this, especially if it's a contract matter. And it came off to me as if, there's a real concern from Irsay about the demands that Lamar has for a highly guaranteed contract, especially if it gets into, several years, 4 or 5 year deal, the amount of money that it's going to take to guarantee away, put into escrow, and put all in your eggs in that basket. It very much came off as problematic to Jim Irsay for where he stands with guaranteed deals, and also I think what he went through with Andrew Luck and just the risk of losing a quarterback to injury to something you can't 100% control. So I think if there's a way, it's that, it's got to be that Lamar Jackson is just ready to move on from Baltimore, and that he sees the Colts as just the right next place, the best next step, even if he's not getting everything he wants in terms of guarantees. He's willing to dial that back, and especially dial back the length of the deal to where, if they have to put a lot of money in escrow, it's 3 years of it rather than 5. And he would just kind of have to see the Colts as a place that can fulfill their promise. If they promise to him, hey, we're going to lower the guarantees, but we're going to find a way for you to sign multiple deals here. We're going to keep you healthier. We're going to get you out of this place where there's questions about your health. And I think they have some ways of doing that with Shane Steichen and leaning on Jonathan Taylor and throwing the ball more than he ever threw in Baltimore. It just takes a lot of different, negotiations like that for a franchise that I don't know has, as much benefit of the doubt anymore after, they've been through this with veterans and they haven't fulfilled all the promises and it hasn't worked out. It just surprised me if that works. But if it does, it's because they're the one team that's willing to, engage enough on this, and then Lamar's got to be ready to move on enough to where, that ends up being a good enough compromise, good enough bet on himself that they can do it. But I think it's going to take a big-time compromise between the kind of guarantees he wants right now and the kind of guarantees they're willing to offer.
And Nate Atkins has been at Columbus, Lexington, Gainesville, all those pro days. Colts will start their offseason program a week from today, and sounds like this week going to be a very big week for the Colts with those private QB workouts. Nate, great stuff, man. Hope you've enjoyed the travels, and thanks for coming on here the past couple weeks.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Happy to be here anytime.
It's Nate Atkins right there on the Payless Liquors
Good
hotline.
stuff.
Again, this week from Peter King, that the Colts will have private workouts with Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis.
But if Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud blows them away, Kevin, in your opinion, that means that A, they are covering their bases should, for some reason, those guys fall, or B, they are making sure that it's not still worth them moving into the position to get them.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would guess A. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't see, especially because Carolina's already moved up, and Houston. Are you really going to trade back with the team in your own division?
Right.
I just can't see that unfolding. We'll get more of a national draft perspective coming up at 9:30. Matt Miller from ESPN, you've heard him on these airways before. He's going to join us again to talk a little bit more big picture stuff with the draft 3 weeks from Thursday. You're listening to Kevin Aquaria right here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Thanks to Nate Atkins for his time. Matt Miller going to join us coming up in 30 minutes. Jake Query along with Kevin Bowen and Mark Dykton. IndyCar yesterday in Texas, kind of a planes, trains, and automobiles to get back. Made it back via Cincinnati after, and hopefully safe travels this morning to my colleagues Michael Young, Mark Janes, Nick Yeoman, who drove back. Dallas had really bad storms. I think they had a tornado warning at Dallas Love Field, which is the Southwest airport. So they shut down that airport, and they had us coming out like late today. So I managed to get lucky and go to DFW, get a flight to Cincinnati. Thanks to Mike Byron for picking me up.
That's friend of the year right there, Mike Byron.
Oh, yeah.
Friend of a lifetime.
He is that. No doubt about it. So he picked me up, and we made a little road trip out of it last night and got back here.
How's Boo doing, by the way? Your first adventure away from the cat. How did he handle it?
So Boo was good. Actually, it's funny when I...
Boo had some people over.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, they watched the game Saturday night.
Kegger queries.
Dad's going to be home late, guys.
What's all this green laying around, all this catnip around
empty
here?
Sheba cans all over the place.
Sunday fun day for Boo with Dad out.
Boo ripping.
When I called Shannon
pits
to help her, because Shannon's a travel agent, when I called her and I'm like, hey, can you help me get a flight home? And she's like, okay, I will, but like I'm over here at your place now with Boo, and I could hear him in the background. He was good. When I got home last night, he hopped up and went to sleep, and so it was good. So it was good. His first weekend alone after hell, he was in jail a week ago. So
Jail. Jeez.
You know,
damn teenagers.
That's right. Mark, tell me about what happened with WWE. I mean, I know obviously they had SmackDown or whatever.
No.
What do they call it?
WrestleMania, my friend.
What's the difference between that and SmackDown?
A great deal.
Boy,
SmackDown's a weekly program, and then WrestleMania is the
I'm sorry, that's the yearly
Super
event,
Bowl
right?
of the Super
Indy
Bowl
500,
of pro
the
wrestling.
Daytona 500 right there by you.
No, okay. So, well, listen, I got 2 hours sleep. Have a heart. But they were bought, or there was a unification of sale or something, right?
Yeah, so they had their big, obviously, WrestleMania last 2 days, Saturday and Sunday in L.A. happened. Very good show both nights. And then this morning, boom, WWE has been sold to Endeavor, who also owns UFC, for a reported $9.1 billion. So the merger of WWE and UFC with Endeavor is estimated to be about $21 billion in total. So the McMahon family, Vince McMahon, all them, no longer the major stockholders in WWE. Endeavor takes over 51% of the company.
So what do you think?
I mean, it's a long time coming. They've been saying it for a while that was going to occur, and now the day after their biggest event, new ownership.
You think those audiences are that, like, do they mesh? I mean, like, is it if you like UFC, you like WWE? I don't.
There was a little crossover appeal, I guess, at the time, because like Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, they're both in WWE now, and they were UFC. But I don't. I'm personally not in that group.
Right.
I'm sure there are people that follow in that category, but I don't per se.
Now you're a diehard when it comes to the wrestling stuff, right?
Yeah, been watching it since I was a kid.
Do you have a favorite wrestler?
Well, of all time, yes, Shawn Michaels.
Okay.
I see McAfee and Kittle last night.
Yeah, they McAfee and Kittle were on Saturday. Kittle was there again. Al Michaels was in attendance. They were showing him. There's a bunch of celebrities all over the place.
Speaking of celebrities, I don't know how many will be in attendance tonight. It's just the second time in national title game history that we don't have a 1, 2, or 3 seed playing for a national championship.
It's only the second time, you said?
Second time in history.
So was Butler, Connecticut one of those?
You've got to go back. I believe it was UConn, Kentucky. What was that, 2014?
Okay.
I think UConn might have been a 3 seed the year the Butler played them in a national title game. Can you recall? I mean, I guess that would qualify, UConn Butler. I was going to go back to UConn, maybe Georgia Tech. I can't recall. Maybe it was 2014, but I just think the name brand of Kentucky still carries enough weight. Probably a least anticipated national title game tonight.
I mean,
like viewership, I think will be down. Jake, hell, if you wanted to drive to Houston last night, I know it's not very close. You probably could have got in the gate for pretty good money.
I tried flying to Houston, Oklahoma City, and San Antonio, all three, to get a flight out. But same problems everywhere. Is It's really interesting to me, Kevin, that you make the point about Connecticut and television ratings and everything else because, I looked this up, and I'm going off the top of my head here. So Connecticut, if they win tonight, that will be their 5th national championship, okay? The only schools that have won 5 titles would be UCLA, Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, Indiana, Connecticut. That's it, right? Now, UCLA won from the first time that they won a title to their 5th title was 6 seasons. That's pretty impressive. Connecticut will have done it 1 to 5 in the second fastest amount of time in college basketball history.
3 different coaches, too.
Correct. Actually, they were tied with Duke for 24. Indiana's took 47 years. North Carolina's took like 50 years. Kentucky, I think 30 maybe. But, yeah, 3 different coaches, essentially all in the same turn of the century. I realize the first one came in 99, but I mean, that's impressive. You're talking every 5 years, Connecticut wins it.
Yeah, and it's not like Calhoun left it stocked for Kevin Ollie, or Kevin Ollie left it stocked for Danny Hurley.
And with Danny Hurley now, Kevin, it feels like it's like, okay, well, what stops them from becoming the next Duke?
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't think they're super senior laden. It's not. Yeah, obviously, we'll see what happens, but it's one of the more impressive tournament runs we've had, I think, ever, just with how dominant they have been throughout. And, I've mentioned this throughout the show this morning, but you watch them on Saturday night, and because I felt this way about Miami at times, watching them in the tournament and watching them during the ACC, but Connecticut, they have nobody on the floor that you look at and say, oh, yeah, we don't need to guard him out there. Or, yeah, we don't need to worry about him driving. Everybody you have to worry about. I mean, look at the big dude and how they started the game on Saturday night. Sonogo's like, oh, you're going to leave me open from the top of the arc? Hey,
I mean,
boom. He hits 2 threes in the first 4 minutes of the game. And it's just, they have no weaknesses.
And they have just, in this tournament, Kevin, jumped out to leads where you're like, it's over, right?
Yeah, and then when they've needed to, they've answered every run. Again, if San Diego State can somehow muck it up, get the game into the 60s, I say 50s, there's no chance UConn only scores in the 50s. We'll see how it plays out. 7.5 is the spread. I thought I saw the over-under. Mark, did you see it? Was it 130? Does that sound right?
Let me pull it up. I'll check for you. It might have changed.
Was tad low. I'm going to get San Diego State again. Wants to keep things low scoring if possible, but 7.5 for San Diego, 7.5 point underdog San Diego State.
132.5 is the over-under.
32.5. So, 64, 57-ish, something like that?
Mm-hmm. Not overly high.
San Diego State does have, and we saw it with Alabama in the Sweet 16. I mean, they are a different looking team than a lot of what I think UConn has faced throughout this tournament from just a length and defensive mindset team, but I see 7.5, and if you were going to make me pick, I would take UConn. I probably won't touch it, but I would take UConn.
I think San Diego State can make it surprisingly close, but
they can't get behind like they did Saturday night.
Correct. If Connecticut gets out to that a 10, 12 point lead early, it's probably going to be a long night.
Yeah, that was really fortunate of them with all those offensive rebounds and coming back.
If you want to, Purdue fans should hope for a blowout because then it's fewer people that will be watching one shining moment and reminded of Fairleigh Dickinson, right? Right?
I'm trying to think of the moment you will get. Do you think they'll show Tobin locker room? You think you'll get that? We can beat Purdue? You think they'll play the audio of that? I'm trying to think of the iconic moment from that game.
Probably. Didn't they hit a 3? It was a 5-point game for Purdue. And then Fairleigh
Purdue
Dickinson,
fans are loving this right now.
Didn't they have a 3-point play that gave them the lead back with 4 minutes to go? I think it would probably just be.
I knew they had one of the threes where they kind of pulled Edey away from the basket. He didn't go all the way out there, and the kid hit one from the top.
I think it would just be the call of Fairleigh Dickinson becomes the second 16 seed or whatever the call was.
Somebody asking in the chat, does Jim Nance sign off with goodbye, friends?
I am curious how he will end it. Tonight is his final.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not his final broadcast, right?
No. He's going to say hello, friends, as soon as the Masters starts on Thursday.
Right.
But this is it for national title. Iron Eagle, right? Taking over next year?
I believe so.
That's who it is?
Uh-huh. Okay. Who I think is outstanding.
Yeah, he's very good.
239-1070 is the telephone number. Jeff's been waiting, right?
Yeah, Jeff, want to talk IndyCar?
Jeff, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. Query, first on the dock here. North Central High School, those boys wouldn't have the first initials of B. Their first names wouldn't have been B and B.
The Twins?
You talking about the cheaters?
The Twins, yes.
That is not correct. It was at Eastwood, not North Central, but no, they did not have. They had differing first initials.
All right. So, hey, on to bigger things. So I thought the IndyCar race was absolutely phenomenal. I don't remember if that was 93 or 94 when Jimmy Harbaugh just absolutely shocked, the country with the Colts run to the
94. Let her rip. 94.
94?
Yep.
But, I came home from church yesterday and I turned on my television. I watched that race. And I got to tell you, honestly, I really thought it was one of the best IndyCar races maybe that I'd seen in a couple of decades. The IndyCar did such a good job getting that aero kit just right. And it seems like, I know last year it was a good race, but it wasn't anything like this year. And I think all those guys that went home after the truck race and then watched the highlights yesterday were like, wow, we went to the wrong race. That was just phenomenal. And I'll tell you, the passing, just amazing. And I think most impressive was after the race, we didn't have to hear Will Power go, oh, man, what were we doing out there? Like we all could have died, and it was just so scary. And, you get these young drivers coming in, and they're just ready to go, and they're ready to race.
Well, Pato Ward is...
Jeff, that Australian accent.
That was pretty good.
How about that?
Pato Ward is a phenom, I'm telling you. I think he could win Indy this year. Hell,
his oval history is absurd.
Yeah, he's fearless, and... he's energetic, and he's just, man, he controls the car. I mean, it truly is amazing. And Newgarden obviously is a great talent. There's a lot of talent for sure. And
is there any takeaway from yesterday and how the racing will look?
See, that's
in less than 2 months on the next oval here in Indy.
I don't know that anybody knows that for certain, and I'll tell you why, Kevin, because
it's kind of always the question.
The banking in Indy's 9 degrees, 12 minutes, right? That's as much as my geometry as I know.
Can you put that into our elementary? I know you're taking advanced math right now, but
the banking at Indy is essentially very less severe. Indy is basically a rectangle, even though it's an oval. It's basically a rectangle because the banking forces you to make the turn. Texas, the banking is 24 degrees, so it is a much higher bank. So as a result of that, it is like a slot car. The inertia just kind of carries you through. And it allows those drivers to use, so you can go 2 and even 3 wide in the turns in Texas. You cannot at Indy. So at Indy, somebody's got to fall back every single time. So Indy's more challenging probably. But yes, from an aerodynamic, yesterday was also the perfect conditions to race because it was cool. It wasn't overly hot. The rubber likes that. The cars were stuck. It was a great race. I mean, it was a lot of fun to call. It harkened people back, I think, to the days of, the old IRL when people loved watching that stuff.
I know I've kind of been on a soapbox about this today, and I get that it's not realistic, Jake, to have 5 to 6 guys all with a realistic chance to win the race with 5 to go on every single oval.
Right.
That just doesn't happen. But, find me the last road course or street race that didn't have a restart with 1 or 2 to go, that with... 1 to 2 to go, there's 3 or 4 that even have a chance, not even 5 to 6.
Well, there were 3 to 4 for sure, right? I mean, you kind of knew that Newgarden and Pato Award, they had been the best cars all day.
Yeah.
But Alex Palou was right there with them.
Dixon made a run, I think with 4 or 5 to go. So just great theater.
Got up there as well. It was great.
Great theater. Mark, you said that you had an interesting Colts-related message?
Yeah, so Eric slid into our show DMs over the weekend. He had an interesting question. It's a bit kooky, but stick with me. I thought it'd be interesting to bring up to you guys.
Okay.
He said, fun question for the show. A time traveler comes back in time and simply says, quote, the Colts will not select a QB at number 4 in the 2023 NFL draft. He then disappears and back into the portal. What can you assume best happened? They traded up, traded back, or picked a non-QB at number 4?
Transfer portal? I was a little.
The time traveler is coming out of
Life
somewhere. I
wallet
guess
paid
the
out.
Time
Money for
traveler
this?
is Jordan Geronimo, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to Auburn.
The Ruiz guy from Miami, he's bringing him too. It's a good question. You trade back and Chris Ballard go hand in hand. Obviously, you need two to tango there, so that would be the one place I would pause. I might go with Will Anderson out of Alabama. And you know what? I am team draft quarterback, and team draft quarterback for years now. That's the path you have to go down to try and achieve the most success you can have in the NFL. But if you were to say, here's an edge rusher that's giving you a dozen sacks for the next decade, boy, that would be hard to turn down, wouldn't it?
I would say that it's a great question. If they do not draft a quarterback at 4, I'm in agreement with you, Kevin. I don't think they'll trade. I know that Ballard has liked to trade and move back and collect picks and everything else. I also think if you look at – you'd have to look at when they have dropped back and picked up an additional second or third round pick. You know, what players did they get for that? What was the payoff?
Well, let's go back from 2018 when they traded back from 3 to 6.
Okay.
With the Jets. So they traded back from 3 to 6. They got the additional second rounder, which I forget exactly if they took Braden Smith with their own second rounder, or if they took Darius Leonard with the Jets second rounder. But obviously those are two really good players you got. And then in the next draft, you got the Jets second rounder, which, you know, I think ended up being, I would have to look closer at that. Was it Rock Yassin?
I think it was Rock Yassin, actually.
Again, moving back 3 spots in a draft that you weren't going to take a quarterback, and you were able to get Darius Leonard and or Braden Smith. And I know there were others involved in it. I think Jordan Wilkins had a pick involved in it. I'd have to look closer at it. But that obviously worked out great for the Colts. That was a great trade. And really needed at the time when you were having such a big overhaul defensively.
The reason I ask that is because does Ballard look at some of the when Ballard has tried to get big and he's done a nice job on some of them. Don't get me wrong. But he's also had some swings and misses, in particular at the defensive side of the ball early in the draft, like in earlier rounds. And so does that give him pause to again accumulate like 3rd and 4th round picks and think that that's going to be the answer for him? And so if there is a guy like Will Anderson on the board, does he say, you know what, I can't pass on this. We'll get a quarterback another way, but this is too good to pass on because I know how at times difficult it can be to hit at this position later.
I think the other question you would have, Jake, or at least I have, is does Jim Irsay mandate quarterback at 4? You listen to Irsay's comments from the owners' meetings, it's hard to think they don't sit there at 4 and take a quarterback.
I think it's possible that, Kevin, it's possible that they may look at it. I don't know if Irsay necessarily would think this, but is it possible that Irsay can be convinced, you know what, Jim, there are not 4 franchise quarterbacks in this draft. You know what I mean? That we're better off.
So then trade up to 3.
There's not a franchise quarterback in this draft, is what I mean. You know what I mean? Is it possible that they say, look, just because we need a quarterback does not mean that the quarterbacks in this draft are guys that you build around? They're just not. I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm saying, Is it possible that they think that they say, you know what? I know everybody thinks that there are 4 franchise quarterbacks in this draft, but our expertise tells us no. There are 4 possibly good quarterbacks in this draft, but there are not 4 quarterbacks that you mortgage your future over, and passing on better players at 4 would be mortgaging our future. Is it possible they think that?
That's a question we can throw to Matt Miller coming up in about 10. ESPN's Matt Miller, NFL draft analyst, going to join us in 10. Let's sneak in Phil before we get to a morning check down. What's up, Phil?
Okay.
Dun, 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 dun.
Well, Phil didn't want to do it.
What do you think happens there? Like, oh, boy.
It's my time to shine.
I just hated hearing Kevin's voice. I was hoping Jake would bring me on. What did Phil want to chat about more?
He didn't. He wanted to talk about a number of things. He said, but he mentioned Iowa and UConn.
Did any of you see? And maybe I was the only one. When I saw Iowa LSU scrolled like on the bottom ticker, like on Saturday and like leading into Sunday's game, I thought it was the Citrus Bowl. I thought the Outback Bowl was being played.
Do you ever have this? This happens to me a lot during.
Is Kirk Ferentz facing off against Les Miles?
Well, given the start time, I wouldn't have,
Right, and ABC as well. I'm like picturing Les Miles in the visor on the sideline.
Do you ever have this happen to you during the middle of February? Like you wake up on a Saturday and you're looking at the ticker and it's like, Iowa State 72, Kansas 47, and you're like, holy cow! Like Kansas they're number one in the country. They got beat by 20, and then you look, oh yeah, NCAA.
yeah.
On the ticker. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, the women's scores too. And there's many times as a Notre Dame basketball fan, I've kind of hoped that the men's team has been the women's team. Are we getting Micah Shrewsbury this week, Mark?
I mean, the line is out again. They're like mentioned that Kevin was shirtless. I'm like, that's not going to want them to come on.
I don't think that's the bait that we want to
do. What do you mean? I think that's a great.
We're trying to entice him to come on.
Yeah, I think it's very enticing.
I think you're better off saying Kevin went to Cathedral. Probably better off, right?
Hey, this guy was shirtless because you got hired. You want to jump on for a few minutes and talk to him?
How do you get your resume to the top of the stack? You don't get there by saying, I went to same high school. You say the guy had the shirt off when you were hired. Okay. You know that.
Has he seen the photos?
That's why they're slow on the return.
I think Micah would have an appreciation for the
You know what you should do? You should send him the photo of Kevin with his shirt off next to E.T., and then send it to Micah Shrewsbury and say, we just want to know if you can phone home.
Well, I think he would say one look and be like, our strength and conditioning program will be a major focus here.
I'd love to come and talk to that alien anytime.
How many Notre Dame basketball games in your lifetime have you attended, Kevin?
Ooh, it's a good question. Probably 24.
And you get like totally hyped for it, like when you're in the atmosphere. And
yeah. I mean, I hate that the Crossroads Classic is done. I thought that was my favorite day of the year. Went to a game at Miami of Ohio once, at Cincinnati once, at Louisville twice. RCA Dome, mentioned that to Jordan Cornette a few weeks ago when he was on. That
was before or after he was talking about my playing days.
Second, that was great. That was great. All right, morning checkdown time before we get to Matt Miller.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Jake, the Pacers are officially eliminated from the playoffs and/or play-in. They lose last night in Cleveland. Actually competed pretty well with the usual suspects resting, tanking, however you want to call it. No Halliburton, no Turner. They really were competitive for much of the first three quarters. Donovan Mitchell, though, 40 points. The Cavs win 115-105. They are sixth now in the tank standings. The Pacers, Rick Carlisle asked afterwards if their approach will change at all heading into the final week of the regular season.
Our approach is going to be the same. I mean, we're competing. It does no good to step onto an NBA court and not compete. And this is where, the way we're set up with our young guys, it really is a great opportunity for them. We get New York twice. And I can guarantee you New York's going to be trying to win those games. That's how they're built. And the Detroit game, we'll see where we are when we get to that one. But this period of the last 2.5, 3 weeks is very valuable.
By the way, last night in the association, the top two leading scorers, two guys had 40 last night in the league. One played at Kentucky, one played at Louisville. Mark, you got a guess?
No.
Well, Mitchell, of course.
Donovan Mitchell had 40 for Cleveland last night.
Devin Booker?
Good guess. Anthony Davis with 40, and the Lakers 134-109 win.
Are the Lakers going to get in? I think they'll be in the play-in,
LeBron
right?
with a triple-double, man, 18, 10, and 11, and AD. That's the formula now, right? Is AD is your go-to, and LeBron's your facilitator.
Yeah, looking out west right now, the Lakers are the 7 seed, so they would just need to win one of the two play-in games to get in. They're only a half game back of 5 and 6. The West is crazy heading into the final week of the season.
How about Shaedon Sharp, by the way, 27 last night for Portland? Is that because Portland sucks and somebody's got to score?
It's a type of trajectory, though, you wanted to see late in the year.
You're right.
What's Dyson Daniels doing? Remember, he was another one that we...
I'll be
He's
honest.
the one that I wanted. He's in New Orleans, right?
Every time I hear him, I think of the other Daniels in the news right now.
I always think of vacuums.
I'm like, are they related at all?
Oh, there we go.
What? The Dyson?
Has
What are
it
you
been a
talking about?
stormy rookie season for Dyson? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I was thinking more of the vacuum, but anyway, we'll move along.
He's averaging 3.8 points a game.
Well, Stormy could be receiving a little bit more than that. All right, moving on to Major League Baseball. We mentioned it, 3 undefeated teams to opening weekend. Are you surprised there's only 3?
Yes. This early? Absolutely.
Rays, Twins, and Rangers, so all in the AL. If you're looking from a local standpoint, Mark Tucker Barnhart goes back to Cincinnati, right?
Yep. Tucker Barnhart probably going to hopefully, be in the backstop these next 3 games. We'll see.
Cubs won the opener, lost 2 to the Brewers then. Reds, flip of that. They lost the Pirates in a really competitive game on opening day. Then they won both of them this weekend. White Sox, 2-2 start. Guardians, 3-1. They were out in Seattle. The Cardinals take 2 or 3 from the Blue Jays.
Now wait a minute. I want to see here our Pabst Blue Ribbon Derby here. The
How many
records
people are
so
in this
far.
thing again?
Well, I'm with Kevin. Let's just keep track of our little group.
I'll be honest.
Right?
I thought you were going to be like, I was just looking up pictures of Stormy just to see where we're at right now.
Okay. So, of the 3 of us, the one that has the most wins at the end of the year, Kevin's Oakland Athletics. Taking a look at them, they are at 1-2. Mark, your Arizona Diamondbacks, currently the Diamondbacks at 2-2.
2-2.
The cute fella Baltimore Orioles
Mark
also
says
1-2.
2-2 with so much.
I kissed the sky right there.
Marks are half game up.
I mean, the A's won their opener, and I'm like, hell yeah, they're going to win 100 this year. Nothing like
They're
baseball
58th
fandom.
of the way to where they're supposed to be.
Nothing like baseball fandom on April 3rd. I mentioned it earlier. The Reds started last year 2-2, and then they lost 20 of 21.
I will say I'm a bit concerned because the run differential for the Arizona Diamondbacks, they've scored 7 runs. They've given up 20.
They're 2-2 though,
They're
right?
2-2. Although I guess Kevin's isn't. Kevin, you have the Oakland A's.
Yeah.
3 runs scored, 20 runs allowed.
Record. All that matters.
Jake, though, Baltimore piling it on.
The Boston Red Sox have scored 9 runs in all 3 of their games.
Total or each game?
No, each game. They won 9-5. They won 9-8. They lost 10-9.
Ooh.
To the cute fellow Orioles.
Oh boy,
it's entertaining nonetheless. Yesterday in the women's national title, it's Kim Mulkey getting number 4, her first at LSU, 102-85 over Iowa. It's a shame that really one of the finest championship performances you'll ever see. LSU was outstanding. It's been dominated by poor officiating, and for some reason we're talking about sportsmanship when if that was the men's game, we'd be laughing at it.
You're right. And Caitlin Clark, who's a phenomenal player and drew a lot of interest towards the women's Final Four. People were upset because she was taunted a bit by LSU. She did a fair share of that in her own right of other teams that she played. She's a demonstrative player, and what goes around comes around.
She was 9 of 22 yesterday, 8 of 19 from 3, 30 points, 8 assists, and 6 turnovers. I hate policing against sportsmanship. Did Angel Reese go a tad overboard post-game? Probably. But again, we see defensive backs celebrate over receivers and, Justin Jefferson, I'm going to do the gritty in your face, and I'm going to dunk on this guy and stand over him. No issue about it whatsoever. Matt Miller, ESPN draft analyst, next.
Guys, solve your
All right, 3 weeks from Thursday, we'll find out the answer to what the Indianapolis Colts are going to do at number 4 overall. To chat more about that and the NFL draft in general, one of our favorites from ESPN, he is Matt Miller, NFL draft analyst. Matt, before we get into the Colts-specific discussion, let's fast forward to the year 2034. Who will be the best player in this draft in the year 2034?
Will, we do this all the time with guys like Will Anderson. We get through the process and you kind of forget about him. I remember this happening to Nick Bosa when Nick was coming out of Ohio State. Everybody, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? And what about Cleveland Ferrell? Like, no. Like, Will Anderson's been the best player in college football the last 2 years. I think that's been forgotten. Over 50 tackles for a loss, over 30 sacks. He's the best player in this class. He's not a quarterback, so he hasn't been talked about a ton because it's a quarterback-driven offseason. But if I have to take one, I'll take Will Anderson.
Okay, so that leads to my question. Is he a good enough player that a team in need of a quarterback shelves the quarterback need to take him if he's available?
It's possible. I'll say it this way. Carolina, no. They traded up. They gave up all that to get a quarterback. They're going to take a quarterback. I think Houston at 2 is more interesting than people have realized. I wrote back at the combine that I had people in Houston telling me, hey, like, a quarterback's not a given at 2. Now, that could be a smokescreen, absolutely, right? Which is why you kind of have to put it out there. Well, like, we'll see. We'll see if we believe that or not. I do think it's possible. Now, for Indianapolis specifically, no way in hell. Like, there's no way that you can take Will Anderson over a quarterback, even though I think Will's great. I feel like, whether it's ownership, the fan base, you guys in the media, people like me in the media, Chris Ballard would probably not be able to keep his job if they don't answer the quarterback question. Again, like, if you're going to say, hey, like, we're cool with Gardner Minshew, we're going to take Will Anderson at 4, I feel like that, there'd be a riot down the streets of Indianapolis.
Matt, in your opinion, and hopefully this makes sense the way I ask this, is this a draft that has 4 quarterbacks whose talent are all so strong that it merits being 4 of probably the top 5 picks? Or is it simply a draft where 4 of the top 5 teams selecting need a quarterback, thus we have selected 4 that would be the guys taken that high?
This is a draft where so many teams need a quarterback. Guys are going to get drafted higher. And I think that's the fun thing about a mock draft is based on, like, what I hear from teams. What if I talk to fellow media members who I trust and they say, like, hey, we're kind of hearing it this way. Okay, that a mock draft is a predictive board. My rankings don't look anything like a mock draft. I like Anthony Richardson. He's my number 17 overall player. I have Will Levis in the mid to late 20s right now. They're going to be drafted much higher than that. So I think it's definitely a year where we're seeing some, manufactured grades. I think that happened in 2021 as well when we saw 5 quarterbacks go in the top 15. I didn't personally think Zach Wilson had any business going number 2. I didn't think Trey Lance was worthy of the number 3 overall pick. He wasn't the 3rd most talented player in that draft. So I think this year is a little bit similar in that I think Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud are really, really good quarterbacks, and in most drafts they're going to be QB1 or QB2. Anthony Richardson, I totally get the appeal. Will Levis, I don't get it as much, but I think if we see those 4 dudes go in the top 5, it's not because they're good, it's because those teams need quarterbacks.
Okay, Matt, I want to focus there for just a second. Matt Miller, ESPN draft analyst at NFL Draft Scout on Twitter. He's with us here on the Payless Liquors hotline. You said Richardson, and I forget the exact number, 17, and Levis middle 20s for you in terms of your draft board. Why is C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young clearly on a tier that's infinitely higher than the other 2?
It's honestly as simple as accuracy. Like, when Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud throw the football, I know where it's going, and they know where it's going as well. I think with Richardson, it's been broken down. I'm sure you guys have had people on who have explained it. It's mechanical. It's not that he's not seeing it. It's not that he's a slow processor of what's happening in front of him. It's mechanical. That you can, in theory, fix. So I feel a little bit better about that. With Levis, he's a little bit of an older guy. couldn't get the starting job at Penn State, so you transfer to Kentucky. And when he had, a weapon or two and a good offensive coordinator, he looked okay, but he still turned the ball over 13 times, 13 interceptions in 2021. This past year, he threw his 10 interceptions. That's what I worry about. So I think with Young and Stroud, I'm really confident putting them in my top 5. I'm confident putting a starter grade on them because the accuracy's there. I mean, to go along with things like poise, command in the pocket, they've both shown an ability to get out of the pocket and make plays happen. Even if it's not running for first downs, it's extending plays, it's creating on the move. They have the athleticism to do that while also being very, very good pocket passers. They can throw to every level. I mean, they can truly scatter the field with the ball and do that at a very accurate clip.
Okay, how close would Hendon Hooker be to Levis and Richardson?
He's pretty close for me. If it wasn't the ACL, that's the ACL and the scheme scare me more than the age. I mean, he's 24 years old. I think he turns 25 in December. The ACL scares me more than anything else because it was November 19th. So if he's already 24 and he's going to miss a year, then you start to be like, okay, this guy's a little bit advanced age. And I know quarterbacks are playing longer than ever. I think what scares me most about the age is you're a little bit more physically, developed at 24 than you are at 19 or 20. I think that's kind of a given. And you worry a little bit about, okay, is this guy who has grown man strength, is he beating up on 19, 20-year-olds? Playing in the SEC, it does answer some of those questions. You feel a little bit better about it. I have Hooker graded pretty highly. I had a first-round grade on him before he got hurt. He's number 27 on my board right now. I think he has the tools to be a starter in the NFL. The scheme there at Tennessee, I mean, I know you guys have seen it. It's a lot of tempo. It's a lot of vertical stuff. They're really using, the wider field with the hashes in college to their advantage. I think that's going to take a transition to the NFL, but every one of these guys has something they're going to have to work on. There's no perfect prospect. Everybody has points of improvement. And I think for Hooker, his points of improvement are, man, this dude did not turn the ball over in college in a scheme that took advantage of the situation. No, let's just, let's build a scheme that works for what he can do. He throws a beautiful deep ball. He's athletic. He's big. He's tough. I think you can find a way to make that work in your scheme.
Matt Miller is our guest. On Twitter, he is at NFL Draft Scout. He is on the Payless Liquors hotline. Matt, a year ago, or roughly thereabout, when the Colts acquired Matt Ryan, and I don't think you were wrong here, so this is not me picking on you at all. You said the best quarterback Chris Ballard has had, no more excuses in Indianapolis, time to win. I think that was both a rational and common thought, and obviously we know what happened there. Do you believe that the seat is warmer for Chris Ballard, and has the national narrative on him changed? I'm not saying completely gone south, but has it changed a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Chris was hired out of Kansas City, I think we got to go back in time and remember, right, that he was the most sought after next guy up at general manager, and he had the opportunity to pick his spot, to turn down interviews, which normally if you're a GM candidate and you start turning down interviews, those interviews go away. But with Ballard, that didn't happen, and he was able to say, I want to go somewhere in the Midwest and raise my kids in that area. Cool. He goes to the Colts, and it's like, this is a perfect marriage. You got Andrew Luck. He's going to be able to build a team there. So I think, we can all say, hey, Chris was dealt a bad hand. His head coach backed out on him, and his quarterback retired. But it's also been long enough that you got to fix some of the issues that you inherited or fix some of the issues that you created. So I'm still a fan of Chris Ballard as an evaluator. I think he is a fantastic scout. Has he done enough in Indianapolis for me to say, okay, we were all validated in our thoughts of him, or I was validated in my thoughts? Absolutely not. And I think the seat is deservedly warm, hot, heating up, however you want to say that. I mean, you've got a gigantic need at quarterback that has existed from the moment you got there. And you've tried all these different avenues to fill that need, which is why I say I think this year, you have to answer the quarterback question long term. No more Band-Aids. I was not a Carson Wentz guy, which is why I tweeted the Matt Ryan thing. I thought Phillip Rivers' arm was shot when he was in with the Chargers, which is why, again, I thought Matt Ryan, hey, this is a guy who's been doing it at a good level at least, and we saw that not work as well. So it's not just the quarterback position. I think we can look at this roster top to bottom right now. It's not very good. So I do think there's a lot of pressure on Ballard to get this right and get it right in a hurry.
So to get a sneak peek at your mock draft, you were saying that you know it's based on chatter, tea leaves, everything else. Colts select who? Which quarterback?
Right now, I would say Will Levis.
Yep, that's exactly what I think.
Yeah, I've been putting that out there for a while. I don't love it, but I would like to think that they have a plan to make that work. I'm anxious to see what Shane Steichen does as a head coach. Anxious to see what that scheme looks like, how it changes from what they did for Jalen Hurts. You obviously can't do the same things for Will Levis, but Will is very athletic. He's got a very strong arm. And I think he's going to come into the NFL, guys, with a chip on his shoulder. I've heard that his interviews with teams, he's a little pissed off that everybody's talking about Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson and not him. So I think there's going to be a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, which could be a good thing.
Matt, we'll end with this and appreciate the time. Again, Matt Miller from ESPN is with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. From a local angle, we'll throw a couple names at you. Michael Mayer going round one. Is he the top tight end or no?
He is for me, and I think he should go round one. Absolutely.
Okay, and then how about the Purdue guys? Where do you think, and this is obviously more middle to late rounds, Aiden O'Connell and then Payne Durham and what appears to be a pretty deep tight end draft?
Yeah, I would say both those guys, day three. Aiden O'Connell had a little bit of buzz for a minute, that he could maybe go higher. I'll tell you, when you said Purdue, I thought you were going to ask me about Charlie Jones and Corey Trice.
Okay.
I like them better. I think there's a good chance that Corey Trice and I would say Trice then Jones probably go higher than O'Connell and Durham.
Like 4-ish, 5-ish, right around there?
I wouldn't be surprised if Trice went third and Jones went like late third, early fourth.
Boy, Jones had a hell of a season.
He did
this year. It was fun to watch.
Love Charlie Jones. I want him on my team. If I take Chris Ballard's job in the next 24 days, we're drafting Charlie Jones.
There are a lot of people around here that will come pick you up. Yeah,
he sold his house about a month or two ago. I think a lot of people would have said, "Hey, Matt Miller can move into Westfield."
Hey, give Jimmy my number. We'd have a good time.
Well, he's hired people from ESPN before,
right?
Front.
I've got the pedigree.
Matt, great stuff. Always enjoy our conversations. I know it's a busy month of April for you, so thanks for making time for us.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
That's Matt Miller right there on the Payless Liquors hotline. Interesting on the Purdue front.
That'd be good for those guys. Third, fourth.
Charlie Jones and Corey Trice. Again, tight end wise, I wanted to get to that with him. It sounds like tight end, a really deep draft class, defensive end, and cornerback, which, Jake, if you looked at the Colts cornerback depth chart right now, it would be Kenny Moore, Isaiah Rodgers, and Dallas Flowers.
Yeah, you got to get depth there. A lot of it.
Corner, O-line could use some help right now. All right, we'll end the show with a pop quiz. 317-239-1070. Give us a call for Jiffy Lube oil change.
Hello, I'm Dave.
on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Have you studied? Can you handle the pressure? Sharpen your pencils. It's time for the Pop Quiz with Kevin and Query. Brought to you by Jiffy Lube, Indiana's favorite oil change since 1985.
Very manageable pop quiz, Kevin.
Okay. The old
Very
kiss of death
manageable.
from Jake Query here
That's right.
on a extremely sleep-deprived Monday. Nap is going to feel good for Jake and Boo
No doubt.
here in a bit. Mark a number 1 through 8.
Let's go fast fingers, Jackson.
Jackson.
Hey, what's going on, fellas?
Jackson, how we doing, man?
Hey, not too bad.
Jackson, do you have any rooting interest tonight in San Diego State and UConn?
I'll probably just root for the underdog, but not really. I'm an IU guy. I was pulling for FAU in Miami.
God, boy, when that shot went in, the first thought I have is just, boy, Dusty May.
Yeah, I mean...
You know, you just never know how many more of those moments you're ever going to get.
Jackson, San Diego State's kind of cool, though, don't you think? Just because it's something different.
Oh yeah, definitely going to root for the underdog for sure.
Plus, I kind of like the COVID angle we brought up earlier, Jake. Like, you know, they were a team that was 31-2 during the COVID year, and you know, get the tournament obviously ripped out for everybody, but for them as well. So, all right, Jackson, appreciate the call. Jake, you want to lead off?
Yeah, I'll lead you off here, Jackson. You ready? Baseball's opening weekend is in the books. 3 teams open today, still unbeaten. Which of these teams is not among the unbeatens? So 3 of these are unbeaten, 1 is not. Twins, Rangers, Rays, or Guardians?
Guardians.
All right, number 2, Jackson. LSU is your women's NCAA women's basketball champion. While it was the first time for the LSU program, it was the 4th for Tigers head coach Kim Mulkey, who won 3 titles at Baylor. Mulkey is the first head coach to win an NCAA women's championship at different schools. Name the only men's coach to win NCAA basketball tournaments at multiple schools. A, Rick Pitino. B, Gary Williams. C, Roy Williams. D, Bill Self.
I think Patino won at Louisville and UK.
Okay.
So let's go with Patino.
If you're looking for confirmation, I think you're right.
All right, we were talking about San Diego State, Jackson. The Aztecs are in the title game for the first time, while UConn is going for their 5th title. Who did UConn beat to win their very first national title in 1999? Was it Michigan State, Florida, Duke, or Georgia Tech?
Man.
Never forget, my parents didn't let me.
I remember that.
Parents didn't let me stay up for this one.
Elamine and those guys. I'm gonna say Duke, but I'm not sure.
Kind of an upset, that one. Ricky Moore was big for UConn in that game. All right, number 4 here, Jackson. Great start. On this day in 1988, Wayne Gretzky's streak of leading the NHL in scoring is snapped at 7 straight seasons. Who beat out the great one for the scoring title in the 87-88 season? Denise Savard, Mark Messier, Mario Lemieux, or Dale Hawerchuk?
Boy, got to go with Super Mario on that one.
All right, here we go, Jackson. Last night, the Utah Jazz lost to the Brooklyn Nets, 111-110. That's the 11th time this season that Utah's lost by a single point. That ties an NBA record. Which other team had 11 games where they lost by 1 point in an NBA regular season? Was it the 99 Pacers, the 73 Chicago Bulls, the 62 Cincinnati Royals, or the 56 Minneapolis Lakers?
Hey, let's go with the 99 Pacers.
Jackson, it sounded like you had a reaction to the question relatively early. For a moment there, I thought that you knew it, like, right away.
No, my reaction was like, oh, here we go.
Typical question number 5 was probably what the reaction was. Incredible effort from Jackson.
Solid.
Again, the following teams not among the unbeatens. 3 unbeatens. Twins, Rangers, Rays. He was right. The Guardians are not.
Correct, though.
He was correct that Rick Pitino won in
Yeah,
1996
he's
in
correct.
Kentucky and then kind of won at Louisville.
I feel like
Not in
Roy
the
Williams
banners,
is
but they
kind
won.
of the slip up there. You know, you think that Roy won one at Kansas, don't you?
No. I know.
UConn in 99. I'll never forget waking up, asking my dad who won. It was Ricky Moore and UConn beating Duke. Yeah! Khalid Al-Amin could have played fullback, I think, in the NFL.
Khalid, I saw a great joke once that just said pot pies. And then on the flip side, it said, what are Khalid El-Amin's 2 favorite things that drove him out of the NBA?
Probably enjoyed some Mother
Is that
Bears.
a Johnny Carson bit? What was that? Karnak?
Yeah.
Stores, Connecticut Mother Bears or Avers deal.
Duke was correct, 77-74. Did you just say that? I told you I'm sleeping deprived. Sorry, Mario Lemieux was correct for question number 4.
Number 5. This is tough. The other team that lost 11 games by 1 point in the NBA regular season. He guessed the Pacers. Scotty, I assume they are up there on the list? Scotty says he has no idea. He just threw that on there. The 98-99 Pacers. The 72-73 Bulls. You blew it!
Solid, though.
You don't get to come back tomorrow. You don't even get
would Jerry Sloan have been on that team, Scotty?
You're a complete
given that hint.
loser.
Well, it was fun while it lasted.
So what do we got tomorrow, Kevin? I'm basically going to go home and sleep for 12 hours and then watch the national title game.
You're going to be fresh to go then for the 9:20
That's right.
tip. Certainly we'll recap that. Mark, we've got to talk a little Masters at some point.
Yep.
Will Haskett maybe tomorrow or Wednesday?
Or you want him on Thursday when it all starts off? We can do Wednesday, Thursday, whatever you want. You're the Masters man. So.
Yeah, I say we get him on as early as possible in the week. Try to get some thoughts from Will. Usually he does.
Jordan Spieth going to win the Masters?
He would be a favorite.
Really?
I think Rory's the favorite to win.
Jordan Spieth kind of feels like he's fallen. Like
that course, though, Jake, is like Tony Kanaan or Takuma Sato, the Indianapolis 500.
I think we should all be rooting against Tiger, though, because Kevin said he'd come in with pants off.
Yeah, a Tiger Speedo.
Yeah, I don't want to see
I'm not
that.
going to look into purchasing one until like Saturday, though. I don't want to jinx anything. When I texted Ken Levica on Friday about FAU and if they want it all, we'd love to have him on, I feel like he thought that I jinxed him.
You probably did. He's like, who is this?
You guys believe in that stuff. So we'll talk some Masters. We're going to get Baltimore side of things, too, as well, about Lamar Jackson and where things stand on that front. Everybody have a great Monday. Enjoy the nice weather.